Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Adrianne Robert. Adrianne Robert was born on January 4, 1983, in Brunswick, Maine. She graduated from Leavit High School in Maine in 2001 and the University of Maine at Augusta in 2005. 2 years later, in 2007, she relocated from Maine to Clearwater, Florida. Those who knew her described Adrianne as a beautiful, kind person, always happy and vibrant. At the time of her disappearance, Adrianne was in a relationship with her boyfriend, Justin, and they were planning to start a life together. She was renting a house with her friend Jay. As their relationship progressed, Adrianne and Justin found a new house in July 2012, where they intended to move in together. On the evening of July 13, 2012, Adrianne decided to throw a goodbye party before moving out. Adrianne told Justin that she and Jay would be going out to a movie or a bar. Justin couldn't join them because he was busy with some other things. He didn't object to Adrianne spending the evening with Jay, as they were close friends. Initially, Adrianne and Jay celebrated at home, reminiscing about good times and having a few drinks. Later, they decided to continue the night out and went to the Diamond Doll strip club. Jay called 911 at 3:34 a.m. to report that he had found his roommate, Adrianne, unresponsive. He told the operator that they had been at a nightclub earlier, but Adrianne had left before him. When Jay arrived home, he discovered Adrianne on the bathroom floor, her eyes open but not breathing. There were also signs of a struggle, suggesting a crime had taken place. The 911 operator instructed Jay to focus and perform CPR on Adrianne, guiding him through the process. Jay followed the instructions, attempting to revive Adrianne until the paramedics arrived. Unfortunately, by the time the ambulance arrived, Adrianne was deceased, and the medics were unable to help her. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The police investigation aimed to answer two key questions: who was responsible for Adrianne's death, and was her roommate involved? The police began by thoroughly searching the house, checking every closet and under every bed to ensure the perpetrator was not hiding inside. Detectives and forensic experts observed that there were no signs of forced entry on the front door when they first arrived at the crime scene. Adrianne's body was found on the bathroom floor, wearing only a bra. A stab wound to the chest was the cause of death. The signs of a struggle in the bathroom suggested that Adrianne had tried to defend herself, leading detectives to suspect that the killer was a man. The detectives had to wait for the autopsy results to get more information. While searching Adrianne's bedroom, they noticed that someone had cut off a piece of her bed sheet. It seemed like the killer was trying to destroy evidence, possibly to eliminate any DNA they may have left behind. However, it was puzzling that the killer didn't take the entire sheet, as the remaining part could still contain DNA. Further investigation revealed a substance similar to seminal fluid on the sheet, which was sent to the lab for analysis. Additionally, Adrianne's car was missing from the parking lot next to her house, suggesting that the killer may have stolen it. The police launched an investigation into the crime, searching for potential witnesses and issuing an alert for the victim's car. To piece together the events surrounding Adrianne's death, detectives needed to gather as much information as possible about her final hours. Before proceeding, however, they had to break the devastating news to her family. Adrianne's parents were stunned by the revelation, struggling to come to terms with the loss of their beloved daughter. Justin discovered the shocking truth the morning after, when he saw police surrounding her house. He immediately sensed something was terribly wrong. The detectives then broke the devastating news: Adrianne had been killed the previous night. Given that perpetrators often returned to the crime scene, and Justin's close relationship with Adrianne, the detectives felt compelled to investigate him as a potential suspect. In cases like this, it's standard procedure to investigate the people closest to the victim first. Later that day, police found Adrianne's car abandoned just a few blocks away from her house, with the headlights still on and the keys in the ignition. This discovery further supported the investigators' initial theory that the killer had likely used Adrianne's car to escape the crime scene. Forensic experts thoroughly searched the interior of Adrianne's car for any clues that could help crack the case. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed the CCTV footage to identify the person who was driving the car. Although there were no cameras at the exact location where the police found the car, neighboring buildings had cameras that captured footage of the area. After examining the recordings, investigators spotted a man wearing shorts, a baseball cap, and long hair. The man was seen walking away from Adrianne's car around the same time the 911 call was made. He was heading in the opposite direction, which made it essential for investigators to track his next move. Unfortunately, their attempt to follow him was thwarted when they discovered that he turned a corner where there was no surveillance camera. The investigators rewatched the footage multiple times, hoping to pick up on a detail they might have missed initially. The police had difficulty gathering clear information about the man in the recording because it was taken at night. However, interviewing witnesses provided new leads. A neighbor reported seeing Adrianne and a man running past his house on the sidewalk at night. This was unusual for two reasons. It was late, and they didn't appear to be going for a run. Adrianne was wearing a dress and holding her shoes, while the man was not dressed in athletic attire. Although the situation seemed suspicious, Adrianne didn't appear to be in distress, as she wasn't screaming or calling for help. As a result, the neighbor didn't think much of the incident at the time. To reconstruct the events leading up to the 911 call, investigators spoke with Adrianne's roommate, Jay. Jay had gone to the club with Adrianne and claimed to have found her on the bathroom floor. During questioning, Jay told the detective that he and Adrianne had a few drinks at home before heading to Diamond Dolls, a club they often visited to unwind and escape their daily problems. Jay told investigators that he and Adrianne walked to Diamond Dolls because they had been drinking and didn't want to drive. The police focused on the club because it attracted a questionable crowd. Jay claimed they arrived around 10:30 p.m. and stayed for several hours. While they were sitting at a table, a stranger with a beard and a baseball cap joined them. Later, Adrianne decided to leave, and Jay said he stayed behind. He noticed the stranger had also left. To verify Jay's story, investigators reviewed the club's surveillance footage. They found a camera with a wide angle that recorded everyone entering and leaving the club that evening. The footage showed Jay and Adrianne arriving at the club, appearing calm and normal. Another camera at the entrance provided a clear view of people's faces and clothing. CCTV footage confirmed Jay's account of events. It shows him leaving the club alone at 2:53 a.m. and walking towards his house. The footage also reveals that Adrianne left the club earlier, at 1:38 a.m. Notably, she was seen wearing a dress and what appeared to be a jacket when she arrived at the club, but only wore the dress when leaving. This discrepancy raises a key point. Shortly after Adrianne departed, a man wearing a baseball cap rushed out of the club, presumably to return the jacket she had left behind. After returning the jacket, the man and Adrianne appeared to be engaged in conversation. The exact topic of their discussion remains unclear. Rather than returning to the club, the man followed Adrianne. After exiting the parking lot, they turned right onto a relatively isolated street with few houses. It is unclear whether Adrianne felt threatened or uneasy at this point, and this may remain uncertain. After reviewing the evidence, investigators determined that the man seen on camera at the club and the man near Adrianne's abandoned car were two different individuals. Based on the circumstances surrounding her death, they believed the man from the club's CCTV footage was the likely culprit. The other man may have been an innocent bystander. The police were exploring all possible scenarios to provide answers to Adrianne's parents as soon as possible. Adrianne's family traveled to Florida to collect her belongings. Investigators met with her parents, Mark and Dolores, and assured them that they would do everything possible to find and bring the perpetrator to justice. According to her parents, Adrianne was a friendly person with no known enemies. She had a good relationship with her boyfriend, Justin, and her roommate, Jay. Investigators suspected that Adrianne did not know her killer. The laboratory report soon arrived, revealing that male DNA was found on the sheet, Adrianne's body, and the walls. Although the killer had attempted to destroy evidence by cutting out part of the sheet, forensic experts were still able to recover the DNA. However, when the investigators compared the DNA to the database, they were disappointed to find no matches. As a result, the police had the DNA of an unknown suspect in CCTV footage from the club where Adrianne spent her last evening. Detectives focused on the footage as the key to solving the case. They re-examined the recordings, this time reviewing both daytime and nighttime footage, which led to a breakthrough. Approximately 8 hours before Adrianne's death, investigators spotted the same man who had been talking to Adrianne in the parking lot and had left with her. This time, they got a clearer view of his face. To determine how the unknown man arrived at the club, investigators reviewed the footage and saw that he had taken a taxi. The taxi's phone number was visible on the recording, making it easy to identify the taxi company. This new information made it simpler to identify the man. Detectives discovered at the phone number that ordered the taxi was caught on footage near Diamond Dolls, and it belonged to Thomas Frederick. By comparing his driver's license photo with the image of the man on the CCTV footage, detectives confirmed that it was the same person. As a result, Thomas Frederick became the primary suspect in the case. The police required concrete evidence to arrest Frederick, but the surveillance footage alone was insufficient. To gather more evidence without alerting him, they began secretly monitoring his activities. Their goal was to obtain his DNA sample discreetly, as they were concerned that approaching him directly might scare him off. For a week and a half, the officers tracked Frederick's movements, following him to work and keeping a watchful eye on his home at night. Their patience eventually paid off when Frederick discarded a cigarette butt on the road. The officers collected the butt and sent it to a laboratory for DNA analysis. The purpose of the test was to determine if Frederick's DNA matched the samples found at the residence of Adrianne Robert. While waiting for the test results, the police continued to secretly monitor Frederick, as they suspected he might attempt to leave the state at any moment. After receiving the laboratory report, everyone's anticipation was met with an unsurprising conclusion. The DNA analysis revealed that the samples found on the sheet, walls, and Adrianne's body all belonged to Thomas Frederick. As a result, the police arrested and brought him in for questioning. During the interrogation, Frederick claimed to be a frequent visitor to various clubs and bars, where he would often meet new people. When shown a picture of Adrianne, he stated that they had met at Diamond Dolls, where she had bought him a drink and they had danced and talked. However, when the police confronted him with CCTV footage that contradicted his alibi, he changed his story. Frederick then claimed that he and Adrianne had walked together to the end of the street before parting ways. When asked if he had ever visited Adrianne's house, Frederick responded that he couldn't remember due to his intoxication. This inconsistency cast doubt on his entire account, leaving it unclear what he was trying to conceal. The man initially claimed he had no recollection of being at Adrianne's house. However, it was revealed that a witness had seen Adrianne running barefoot while the man chased after her, which suggested that he was lying. When questioned by the investigators, Frederick provided an explanation. He claimed that Adrianne asked him to escort her home and that she began running suddenly after deciding she was in a hurry. She took off her shoes, prompting him to chase after her in order to stay by her side. Despite Frederick's shifting story, detectives uncovered compelling evidence. A DNA test showed that Frederick's DNA was on Adrianne's sheet and numerous items throughout her home. Frederick altered his story after receiving the DNA test results. Now he's claiming self-defense when confronted about his inconsistent explanations. Suddenly remembering past events he couldn't previously recall, Frederick finally shared an apparently factual narrative about how things actually occurred. They spent an intimate time in Adrianne's home where things ultimately became grim and both engaged. A confrontation between Adrianne and Thomas Frederick turned violent and resulted in a physical fight. During the altercation, Adrianne pulled out a knife and threatened Frederick, who then defended himself. Unfortunately, Adrianne was fatally injured in the process. After the incident, Frederick panicked and fled the scene instead of calling for emergency assistance. He feared being blamed for Adrianne's death. As a result, Frederick was charged with first-degree deprivation of life and appeared in court in January 2014. During the trial, the prosecutor presented a different account of the events. According to the prosecution, Adrianne and her friend Jay had been drinking at home before heading to Diamond Dolls, where they met Frederick. The three of them socialized and chatted casually. However, the next day, Adrianne decided to leave the club early to move into her new home with her partner, Justin. Frederick allegedly took advantage of the situation and followed her, despite her attempts to evade him. He chased her to her home, broke in, and attacked her with a knife from the kitchen. The prosecutor stated that the injuries on Adrianne's body suggested that she was forced to have intercourse with Frederick. Fearing she would report him to the police, Frederick decided to kill her. In an attempt to cover his tracks, he cut out a portion of the sheet where his semen had stained, but this effort was unsuccessful. The police were still able to find his DNA on multiple surfaces, including Adrianne's body. Frederick then took Adrianne's car keys, drove a short distance, and abandoned the vehicle. During the medical examiner's testimony, Adrianne's parents, Mark and Dolores Robert, left the courtroom, unable to bear the details of their daughter's final moments. Mark Robert later explained, "I didn't want to hear that. It won't bring Adrianne back, and I didn't want to know what she endured." It was clear that Adrianne had put up a fierce struggle. Her parents have since struggled to cope with life without their daughter. The grieving family member acknowledged that the healing process would be a long and difficult one. "We're still reeling from the loss of our loved one, and it will take time to recover," Dolores said. "However, we will eventually rebuild our lives, as that's what Adrianne would have wanted. It won't be easy, but we will get through this." During the trial, the defense team attempted to tarnish Adrianne's reputation by claiming that she had invited Thomas Frederick to her home for consensual sex. However, this assertion is baseless and may have been a desperate attempt by the perpetrator to justify his presence at the victim's house. The evidence, however, tells a different story. The presence of DNA points to one person, Thomas Frederick. The defense also claimed that Frederick acted in self-defense. She did sustain a stab wound as he was fighting her. Thomas Frederick was found guilty of first-degree murder and car theft. His claim of self-defense was rejected due to insufficient evidence. Although he was accused of killing Adrianne, there was no evidence to suggest he forced her into a sexual act by threatening her with a knife. Thomas Frederick, 25, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Adrianne's father expressed relief and satisfaction with the verdict, stating that while it wouldn't bring his daughter back, justice had been served. He found it difficult to remain calm in the presence of the man who murdered his daughter, especially since Frederick showed no remorse or sympathy, even after the verdict was read. Adrianne's parents, Mark and Dolores Robert, were overcome with emotion in the courtroom, but felt a sense of relief and happiness when the verdict was announced. They remembered their daughter, an always happy and lively person whose smile could light up a room, and expressed sadness that they would never see her again. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Georgine Kruger. Georgine Kruger was born on April 11, 1992, in Munich, as the middle child in a family of 3. Her older brother, Tommy, was 8 years older, and her younger sister, Michelle, was 2.5 years younger. In June 2006, Georgine and her family, including her mother and sisters, relocated to Berlin. Her mother had secured a well-paying job, and they settled into a home on Stendal Street in the Mobit district. Georgine and her sister started attending one of the top local schools on September 1st, which was accessible by bus despite being in a different district. Their mother was satisfied with her new job and had ambitious plans for the future. However, their peaceful life was soon disrupted. From a young age, Georgine had aspirations of becoming an actress. Inspired by Indian films, she dedicated herself to singing and dancing. She actively pursued her passion by participating in school theater productions and taking acting and stage speech courses. Her teachers recognized her talent and predicted a successful and famous future for her. On Friday, September 22, 2006, Georgine's luck changed for the better. She successfully auditioned for a guest role in the TV series Turkish for Beginners and was expecting a call back on Monday, September 25, to finalize the details and sign a contract. As the new girl in school, she had already caught everyone's attention. However, on Monday, September 25, Georgine followed her usual routine and went to school. She was supposed to be back home by 2 p.m., and since she was expecting the call later that afternoon, she asked her grandmother to answer the phone. Georgine's classmates noticed that she seemed distracted and kept checking the time throughout the day. After school, Georgine quickly gathered her belongings and caught her usual bus, number 27, to head home. She got off at the bus stop, which was close to her house, but never made it home. Georgine vanished somewhere between the bus stop and her apartment and was never seen again. Her grandmother, who was expecting her granddaughters to return from school, had prepared lunch and set the table. Georgine was supposed to arrive first, followed by Michelle, who had a later dismissal due to her music classes. However, Georgine failed to appear, which was unusual because she had been looking forward to returning home and had no plans to stay out. When Michelle arrived home at 3 o'clock, her grandmother became worried because Georgine was nowhere to be found. The grandmother tried calling Georgine's phone, but it was turned off. She tried calling again and again, but there was no answer. The worry turned into fear, and when Vina came home from work and learned that her daughter was missing, she knew something was seriously wrong. The police started searching for Georgine, going from house to house, talking to everyone, and checking every possible place. They even used dogs to try to find her scent, but there was no sign of her. By the next morning, pictures of Georgine were posted all over the city, asking for anyone with information to come forward. Many people called the police, saying they had seen a girl who looked like Georgine, but none of the leads were real. At the same time, the police were checking on people who had committed crimes before, especially those who had been involved with minors. However, all their efforts did not produce any results. It was as if Georgine had disappeared into thin air, leaving behind no signs or belongings, making it seem like she never existed. After months of unsuccessful searching, the investigation into Georgine's disappearance was put on hold due to a lack of leads or clues. However, a year later, an anonymous caller claimed that her body was at the bottom of a nearby lake. Despite being unable to identify the caller, the police decided to investigate this new information. A team of skilled divers thoroughly searched the lake bed using advanced equipment but found no sign of Georgine. Although the lead proved to be false, it renewed public interest in the case. The media revisited the story, prompting the police to conduct another search operation. Investigators were certain that Georgine had passed away, but her family, the Georgines, couldn't accept this. To cope, her mother created a story that her daughter had run away to India and was now a Bollywood star, fulfilling her dreams of singing and dancing. This thought gave her comfort and strength to carry on for her younger daughter's sake. Years after her disappearance, in 2016, the search efforts started again. A resident of Stendhal Street contacted the police, concerned about a neighbor who was often inviting underage girls to his home. This neighbor was identified as 35-year-old Ali K., a Turkish immigrant. On the surface, Ali K. appeared to be a devoted family man, married with 3 children. However, a closer look revealed a disturbing truth. The police were shocked to discover that Ali K. had been investigated 4 years earlier for luring a local schoolgirl with promises of selling her a trendy smartphone at a low price. He took the teenager to the storage room in the basement of his apartment building where he physically assaulted her by hitting her on the head and then forced her into an intimate. Following the assault, he attempted to silence her by making her promise not to reveal the incident to anyone. He handed her a paper napkin to wipe away her tears and helped her clean up before releasing her. Although she agreed to remain silent in order to escape, she immediately informed her parents about the incident once she was free. Together, they reported the violent actions to the police. The schoolgirl described the storage room in the basement, saying it looked like a space created by someone with a disturbed mind. Ali K. was arrested the same day but strongly denied his guilt. He shared his own version of the events, claiming he was selling a gadget and that the teenager had expressed interest in buying it, which is why she was in his basement storage room. They went downstairs together. When the guest saw the device, she expressed her long-held desire to own one. However, due to financial constraints, she offered to compensate in an alternative manner. According to Ali, she initiated intimate contact by kissing him and beginning to undress. He attempted to reason with her and pushed her away, resulting in her falling and hitting her head. This account explained the injuries and bruises on her body. Nevertheless, there was no evidence of intimate contact, as Ali had used protection and later disposed of it. Ali's wife, Melik, supported her husband's account and accused the guest of behaving inappropriately and attempting to seduce him. Consequently, Ali received a suspended sentence for causing moderate bodily harm. As the police reopened the investigation into Georgine's disappearance, they decided to re-examine Ali thoroughly. Ali K. did not have a stable job and relied on odd jobs and benefits to get by. He had a fondness for gambling, which often led to debt. He frequently visited the Turkish coffee shop on the ground floor of his building, where he socialized with various people who would buy him food and drinks. Ali K. took great care to maintain a youthful appearance, often spending excessively on fashionable clothes, including using his children's benefits. However, his most disturbing trait was his attraction to young girls. He would frequently try to meet and interact with them, asking inappropriate questions and offering illicit favors, such as buying them alcohol or cigarettes. Despite his suspicious behavior, the police couldn't link him to the disappearance of Georgine. The case had gone cold, but with the emergence of new evidence, it was reopened, and Ali K. became a prime suspect. When questioned, he denied any involvement in Georgine's disappearance. A search of Georgine's storage room in the basement revealed no signs of Georgine. However, detectives noted that the space seemed more suited for meetings than storage. It was discovered that Ali K. had been previously questioned and his basement inspected, but the storage room had been overlooked. At the time, there was no reason to suspect him, and the door was always locked, making it inaccessible to anyone but the Ali K. Ali had been actively involved in the search operation and was one of the most dedicated members. Although the police didn't have any concrete evidence to charge Ali, they decided to keep him under surveillance to gather more information. They organized unofficial monitoring and intercepted all his phone calls, which soon yielded initial results. Detectives discovered that K had significant debts, unknown to his wife, totaling around 10,000 euros, which he had accumulated through poker losses. The investigation shifted its focus to this aspect, and undercover agents were introduced to Kay's close circle. Their goal was to gain his trust, extract necessary information, and obtain a recorded confession. However, they had to proceed slowly and carefully to avoid arousing Kay's suspicion. To achieve this, a special agent codenamed Hawken was prepared and sent in. He posed as a successful businessman who had recently moved to the Mobit area to open a car service station. Hawken visited the cafe in Ali's building a few times, where he loudly discussed business plans with a partner. As they left, the partner mentioned that they needed to find a manager soon, emphasizing that it was a well-paying position and they needed to choose the right person. After the second man departed, Hawken remained to finish his coffee. It was then that Ali Kay appeared and took a seat at Hawken's table. Hawken seized the opportunity to offer himself for the manager position, initiating a conversation with Ali Kay. The discussion quickly transitioned into a casual chat, during which the businessman observed that Ali Kay seemed well suited for the role. As the conversation progressed, Hawken mentioned the salary associated with the position. Upon hearing the figure, Ali's eyes lit up as he began envisioning the possibilities, paying off his debts and acquiring the sports car he had long desired. The men started talking regularly after exchanging phone numbers, and their conversations quickly turned into a friendship. Hawken even took Ali on business trips to other cities to build trust and get closer to him. However, this friendship had an unexpected outcome. The suspect tried to present himself in the best possible attribute to his employer, bragging about even his smallest accomplishments and keeping quiet about any wrongdoing. Months later, with the case stalled, the investigation introduced a new agent, Susan, who posed as Hawken's girlfriend. Her goal was to befriend Ali's wife, Melik, and uncover any secrets he might be hiding. It didn't take long for Susan and Melik to get acquainted, and soon all four were socializing together as families. Melik was a sociable person, but she had a very positive view of her husband. For years, she had ignored his infidelities, dismissed accusations of violence from a schoolgirl, and genuinely believed her husband was a good person who was just unlucky in his career. However, things were about to take a turn. Susan realized that Melik wasn't just covering up for Ali. Melik truly believed he was incapable of harming anyone. The agents devised a plan to trick the suspect, Ali Kay, by spreading a false rumor about a breakthrough in the Georgine case. They left a newspaper with the article in Ali's car, which they had previously installed with cameras and recording devices. When Ali's wife, Melik, found the newspaper, she briefly showed surprise that the case was still being investigated but quickly lost interest. It became clear that Melik was unaware of her husband's involvement in the crime. Despite the agents' efforts, their 6-month-long investigation yielded no confessions. Ali Kay presented himself as honest and trustworthy, while Melik remained oblivious to her husband's wrongdoing. The agents had gained the trust of the Ali family to the point of being asked to look after their children, but their cover was becoming increasingly expensive to maintain. The agents had to lease a space for a fake auto repair shop and create a sham employment contract to avoid raising Ali's suspicions. In a last-ditch effort, they introduced a new agent, Kaur, who would play the role of a villain. According to the backstory, Kaur was Hawken's cousin with a criminal record, involved in illicit businesses. It was hoped that Ali would form a bond with someone who shared similar interests and confide in them about his wrongdoings. Ali quickly befriended Kaur, and they spent time together, going to various nightclubs and indulging in reckless behavior. Kaur openly admitted that he earned his money through shady means and wanted to spend it lavishly, with Ali eager to join in. At the same time, Kaur frequently complained about his girlfriend, claiming he couldn't break up with her because she was blackmailing him and threatening to expose his illicit business activities to the authorities. According to Kaur, his girlfriend constantly demanded money, and her expectations were becoming increasingly excessive. One day, while drinking with Ali, Kaur announced that he wanted to get rid of his girlfriend, who was blackmailing him and was willing to pay 100,000 euros to anyone who would take care of the problem. Ali's interest was piqued, and he offered to handle the task himself. Cor agreed, but suggested they discuss the details in a private setting when they were sober. In November 2017, the two men sat in a car and discussed their plan to eliminate Cor's troublesome girlfriend. At one point, Cor expressed doubts about Ali's ability to murder a life. In response, Ali revealed a shocking secret that he claimed no one else knew. Ali K confessed to taking the life of a young girl over 11 years ago. In 2006, a girl had moved onto his street, and he became infatuated with her. He would often greet her on her way to and from school, complimenting her despite her young age. He described her as attractive and admitted to having strong desires for her. On a warm September day, Ali K saw an opportunity to act on his desires. He asked a neighbor girl to help him move items from his storage area, and she agreed, unaware of the danger. Once they were in the basement, he locked the door and attempted to kiss the girl, who resisted and screamed. He then struck her on the head, knocking her unconscious, and took advantage of her. Fearing she might report him to the police, Ali K decided to silence her permanently. He grabbed her throat and squeezed as hard as he could, feeling her pulse fade away. He described the process in detail, including the sound of her neck cracking. The girl's body remained in the basement for several days, and Ali K knew that if anyone had searched the area, they would have found him. However, no one suspected anything, and once the initial commotion died down, he wrapped the body in an old rug and disposed of it in a garbage bin that was taken to a landfill. Ali's confessions were recorded by a camera in Cor's car, and he was arrested that same evening. Unfortunately, her remains were never found because the landfill where her body was taken regularly burned its waste. The trial took 2.5 years to conclude. Ali K maintained his innocence, claiming he fabricated the story to gain Cor's trust. He said his plan was to rescue Cor's girlfriend by turning in her to the police once he received the money. Although no other evidence was found, Ali K's detailed confession was enough to convince the jury of his guilt. In March 2020, nearly 14 years after Georgine's disappearance, Ali K was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His wife, Melik, never believed he was guilty, convinced that he had implicated himself for a noble cause. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jessica Bardwell. A team of detectives and FBI agents visited a remote ranch in Farmersville, North Texas, in the evening, and they immediately began searching the wooded area. They soon found a piece of metal covering something, and nearby there was an overwhelming smell of decay. Although the smell was unbearable, the officers were prepared for what they might find. When they removed the metal, they found a female body wrapped in a blue sheet, covered with a blanket, and 2 red and gold towels stained with blood. A pile of trash mixed with dirt served as a makeshift grave for the victim. It was clear that the perpetrator was inexperienced, as their attempts to hide the body only made it more noticeable. The condition of the body was terrible, having decomposed significantly under the scorching sun for a week. It took experts 7 days to officially identify the victim, and they did so by requesting dental records of the presumed victim. The investigation suggested that the discovered body belonged to 27-year-old Jessica Bardwell. The examination revealed that her death was the result of a crime, but the exact cause could not be determined due to the body's advanced decomposition. Notably, an anonymous informant provided crucial information that led to the discovery of the body, but their identity was not disclosed. Jessica Bardwell, a beloved daughter and friend, had seemingly vanished from the home she shared with her boyfriend, Jason Lowe. Her father, Gary, sensed trouble and set out from Mississippi to Texas to search for her, following his instincts that she was in danger. Let's start from the beginning. Gary had an exceptionally strong bond with his daughter Jessica. He recalled being deeply moved when she was born on September 10, 1988, in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Gary and Carla Bardwell were wonderful parents to Jessica and her older brother Brandon. The siblings got along well, with Brandon always protecting his little sister from bullies. Their grandmother, Kitty, who adored her grandchildren, would often visit and engage in fun activities with them, such as reading books, sharing life stories, and playing games. In short, they were a quintessential American family. Jessica was a happy and kind girl with a unique style. She dreamed of working in the beauty industry and opening her own salon. When she was 14, her parents got divorced, and she chose to live with her father, Gary, with whom she had a warm and trusting relationship. Gary, a firefighter, remarried Gina, who was an excellent homemaker and took good care of Jessica. As Jessica grew up, she wanted to be independent and moved to Orange Beach, Alabama, where she worked as a waitress at Cobalt Restaurant. She kept in touch with her father, who would visit her and take her boating and fishing. Jessica's friend and restaurant manager, Kimberly, admired the strong bond between Jessica and her father. At Cobalt, Jessica met Terry, and they started dating. However, she soon fell for Jason, a friend of Terry's, and left him for Jason. This new relationship turned her life around, and Jason promised to help her achieve her dreams. He got a job in Dallas, Texas, and Jessica followed him, without telling her father, afraid of disappointing him. In Dallas, Jessica searched for a new job and looked for a location for her salon. She and Jason planned to get married and buy a house. However, her relationship with her father suffered, and she stopped answering his calls. Gary was worried and eventually found out about Jason and Jessica's move. He tried to re-establish contact, but discovered that Jason controlled all communications. Months later, Jessica contacted her father, and he met Jason when they visited Pascagoula. Gary disliked Jason and tried to convince Jessica not to return to Texas, but she insisted on following her dreams. Despite Gary's concerns, Jessica seemed happy and didn't show any signs of distress. Gary's fatherly instincts kicked in after meeting his daughter's boyfriend, Jason, prompting him to write a song titled "Taken" for his daughter. Unfortunately, his concerns proved justified. 4 months after Jessica moved to Texas, she suddenly stopped responding to her family's calls. The final straw came on May 8th, when she failed to wish her mother and stepmother a happy Mother's Day, a gesture uncharacteristic of her. Gary sensed something was terribly wrong, especially since she missed a cherished family holiday. He immediately called Jason, who claimed he didn't know Jessica's whereabouts, citing their open relationship as the reason. However, Gary knew this was a lie, as Jason controlled every aspect of Jessica's life. The next morning, Gary drove to Texas, suspecting Jason's involvement in his daughter's disappearance. He messaged Jason, warning him that he would face consequences if Jessica wasn't home when he arrived. Upon reaching their apartment, Gary found no trace of Jessica or her belongings, but Jason continued to feign ignorance. Later, Kimberly shared disturbing details about Jessica's relationship with Jason. He had wasted money on drugs and entertainment, and his promises to help Jessica achieve her dreams had vanished. In private, Jason was rude and aggressive, leading to frequent conflicts with Jessica. With Jessica still missing, Gary filed a missing person report with the Richardson police. Detective Hiram Hall, a father of 3 daughters, led the investigation into her disappearance. The police spoke with Jason several times, inspecting the house, but found no trace of Jessica. Jason claimed he last saw Jessica on May 8th, leaving without explanation, possibly to visit her parents. However, investigators discovered that Jessica had actually sold her car 3 weeks earlier, a fact Jason knew about since he was present at the sale. This raised suspicions, prompting the police to interrogate him again on May 12th. During the investigation, police found cocaine in Jason's kitchen and a suspicious substance in his garage. The Audi car inside the garage had mud stains and a detached bumper. Although the car was empty, the police suspected Jessica might be inside. The smell of decomposition led them to examine the trunk, where they found blood stains. Jason claimed he got stuck in the mud while searching for Jessica, but he couldn't explain the blood in the car or the cocaine in his home. Given the circumstances, the case was reclassified as a homicide to prevent Jason from fleeing. Despite the lack of a body, the police charged Jason with homicide, and the search for Jessica continued. Eventually, her body was found, and the autopsy report revealed that she had been brutally discarded. A year later, Jason claimed the incident was an accident and hoped for the jury's understanding. However, the prosecution faced challenges in building their case, and the defense staged a mock trial that resulted in a not guilty verdict. After Jason revealed the location of Jessica's body, he received a shorter prison sentence, allowing her family to give her a dignified burial. Jessica's father, Gary, was consumed by grief and anger, seeking justice in a unique way. He took a photo of Jason, placed it on a stump, and hit it with a 12-pound sledgehammer, finding some small comfort in this form of emotional release. Gary struggled to cope with his loss, feeling guilty for not persuading Jessica to stay away from her controlling boyfriend, Jason. He had hoped she would break up with him, but she had chosen to give him another chance instead. During the trial, Gary replayed their last conversations in his mind, including a call from Jessica when she admitted he was right about Jason after an argument. Although she had briefly found shelter with a friend, she had returned to Jason the next day. Gary had reluctantly accepted her decision, a choice he would later regret deeply. When Mr. Bardwell arrived in Texas, he was determined to seek justice. During her opening statement, prosecutor Cynthia Walker described Jason as a complex person who few people wanted to associate with due to his history of substance abuse, which often triggered violent outbursts. It's possible that Jessica was a victim of one such episode. Prosecutor Wes Wynn called upon Jason's former girlfriends to testify. They corroborated the prosecution's claims, sharing their own fears of Jason's aggression, which was fueled by jealousy. Like Jessica, Jason had isolated them from their loved ones and exhibited manipulative and deceitful behavior. These traits ultimately led each of them to end their relationships with him, which required careful planning and caution. However, Jason was able to present himself as a superior individual to many people, deceiving them about his true nature. In response to the allegations, Jason revealed that he had started using drugs at the age of 13, influenced by his friends, which led to addiction. Despite his struggles, he managed to earn multiple degrees and secure a job with a well-known global company, demonstrating his determination to not let his addiction define him. Jason admitted to planning to fulfill Jessica's dream of building a family together, motivated by his love for her. However, the prosecution presented a different image of Jason, contradicting his claims. The investigation revealed that Jessica died between May 1st and May 3rd, likely on the day she argued with her neighbors, the Jordans, and was last seen alive. After the argument, Jason moved Jessica's body to the garage and placed it in the trunk of his car, where it stayed for several days. Forensic evidence confirmed that the blood found in the Audi belonged to Jessica. Jason then transported her body to a remote farm and hid it in the nearby woods. The sheet used to wrap the body was later found to be part of Jessica's bedding set, which Jason still had in his home, despite Jessica's death and her body decomposing in the car. After Jessica's death, the accused continued to see multiple women, and his phone contained evidence of this, including flirtatious messages and intimate photos that he had sent to them before meeting them at his apartment. Jason claimed that he was trying to distract himself from his emotional pain and guilty feelings by using substances, which he believed made dealing with reality easier. The investigation discovered Jason's presence at Jessica's time of death through a clever tactic. Because Jason had consistently denied any involvement, detectives asked Tommy Jordan, someone who knew Jason, to have a conversation with him while being monitored. During this conversation, Jason finally admitted to making a terrible mistake with Jessica, expressing guilt and remorse, although he only acknowledged culpability for criminal negligence. Jason's statement to the police was seen as a confession, and they realized they had caught him. Jason made a deal with the prosecution and revealed the location of Jessica's body. At the trial, he finally told his side of the story. According to Jason, he and Jessica had taken libido-enhancing pills that evening and got intimate in the shower. During the shower, Jason slipped and Jessica fell, hitting her head on the bathtub. She complained of feeling hot and dizzy and sat down. Jason claimed he offered to call an ambulance, but Jessica refused, saying she just needed to rest and sleep. However, the next morning, Jason found her lying on his chest, unconscious and not breathing. Despite his attempts to revive her, Jessica was dead. Scared of being accused of murder, Jason hesitated to call the police and decided to take matters into his own hands. He initially left the body in his car and later hid it on a remote farm, carelessly dumping her in a pile of trash without a proper burial. However, Jason's story was not believable due to his questionable character and the medical examination findings. The autopsy revealed that Jessica had suffered severe head injuries that couldn't have resulted from just falling in the shower, indicating that Jason had attempted to cover up evidence of physical abuse. As a result, his entire story was proven to be a fabrication. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found Jason guilty. Judge Scott Becker sentenced Jason Lowe to 50 years in prison, a reduced term due to a plea deal with the prosecution. Jason won't be eligible for parole until at least 2041. At the sentencing, Gary, Jessica's father, felt relieved that justice had been served, but was disturbed by Jason's lack of remorse. 2 of Jason's ex-girlfriends, including Chrissy Chambers, were present at the sentencing. Chambers expressed sympathy for Jessica, warning her to get out of the relationship if she could. Even now, Jason maintains his innocence, claiming the homicide was an accident. Unfortunately, Jessica didn't recognize Jason's true nature until it was too late. She had grown up with a positive male role model in her father Gary, and didn't realize that some men can be deceitful and violent. This tragic story serves as a warning to women to prioritize their own safety, freedom, and well-being, lest they suffer a devastating fate, not just for themselves, but for their loved ones. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lily James. Lily James was born in May 2002 in Yamba, New South Wales, Australia. She was the beloved first child of the close-knit James family, especially adored by her maternal grandmother, Barbara. Growing up by the ocean with her younger brother Max, Lily was known for her active and enduring nature, with a passion for swimming. Her father, who coached water polo at an Anglican girls' school, supported her interest. Her friends remembered her as sociable, friendly, and excelling in her studies, always willing to help others, which made her very popular. In her upper school years, Lily's achievements in academics, sports, and community life were recognized, and she was considered one of the best students. Her incredible talent to excel in all areas of activity was undeniable. She also had a passion for the dramatic arts, which led her to participate in the theatre and dance club. She was eventually invited to perform at the famous Woodford Folk Festival, one of Australia's largest annual events. During the event, Lily impressed the audience with her rendition of a monologue from William Shakespeare's Macbeth, showcasing her skills, charisma, and allure, and securing second place in the theatre category. In 2018, Lily passed her beginner's driving test, adding to her list of accomplishments. Her athletic successes were also noteworthy, as she began to pursue water polo professionally, earning the title of swimming champion in the under-17 category. Her parents were thrilled with her successes and celebrated each accomplishment grandly. By her senior year, Lily had decided to focus on a sports career, and in 2020, she enrolled at Sydney Technological University to pursue a bachelor's degree in sports business management. In 2021, Lily started a new job as a water polo coach at St Andrew's Cathedral School to gain teaching experience and spice up her college routine. Thanks to her youth, vibrant personality, and love for sports, she quickly connected with her colleagues, the administration, and her students, trying to find a unique approach to each student and highlight their strengths. It was during this time that Lily met Paul, the new cricket and hockey coach, who caught her attention. Initially, their interaction was friendly and limited to mutual greetings, but it later developed into a romance. Lily fell in love, unaware of Paul's true nature. He showered her with compliments, gave her flowers, and organized evenings together. They agreed to keep their relationship private due to school policy and Lily's personal beliefs. However, over time, rumors began to spread, and Lily discovered that Paul had broken their agreement and portrayed her in a negative light. She felt betrayed and humiliated, so she confronted Paul and ended the relationship. On October 26, 2023, the principal of St. Andrew's Cathedral School in central Sydney sent an email to students and parents at 4:30 a.m. announcing that the school would be closed until the end of the week due to a critical incident. 2 hours later, a second notification reassured families that none of the students were involved in the incident. However, graduating students sitting for exams were exempt from the closure. The school provided psychological support to those affected by the situation. A 24/7 consultation center was set up in the school library to provide assistance. On Thursday and Friday, forensic teams thoroughly searched the school building and surrounding area. Access to the gym was restricted, and the adjacent shower area was scheduled for demolition. The reason for the school's closure was slowly revealed. On October 25, 2023, around midnight, the body of 20-year-old Lily James, the school's water polo coach, was found in the school shower. She had last been seen alive at 7 p.m. Surveillance cameras showed someone following her around 8 p.m., but the pursuer left alone and exited the school. Lily's parents raised the alarm when she failed to contact them, and the police were informed. A night guard discovered her body in a pool of blood with severe head injuries. After recovering from the shock, he called emergency services. Later, detectives invited a family friend to identify the body, which was difficult due to the severity of the injuries. The news of Lily's death sparked an outpouring of grief from the community. Her home was filled with friends, neighbors, and acquaintances offering support to her family. Locals also paid their respects, leaving flowers and toys outside her home, creating a memorial. In a shocking twist, another tragic death occurred on October 27, 2023, at 8 a.m., just 11 miles from the scene of Lily's death. A man's remains were discovered on the rocks of Diamond Bay Reserve, near Vaucluse, an eastern suburb of Sydney. After the police were called, a rescue team was quickly assembled, including a bomb squad, Marine Corps, and a rescue helicopter. At 3:30 p.m., they recovered the man's body and took it to forensic experts for identification. Due to the severity of his injuries from a high fall, visual identification was not possible, so fingerprints were used instead. The experts suspected the man's identity, but they needed confirmation. Eventually, they identified the body as 24-year-old Paul, who was suspected of committing a crime against Lily James. Investigators now had to piece together the connection between the two fatal incidents and uncover what had happened between them. Paul's later attempts to make amends and apologize were rebuffed by Lily, who remained unforgiving. She took comfort in the fact that their brief relationship had at least revealed his true nature to her. Born in 1999 in the Netherlands, Paul came from a wealthy and prominent family. When his father's job required a move to Australia in 2015, Paul and his family relocated. As an only child, he received excessive attention and pampering, which contributed to his selfish and entitled personality. Paul thrived academically and athletically at St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he excelled in cricket and eventually became team captain. He was also involved in organizing extracurricular activities and festivals. While some of his peers found his confidence off-putting, he was charming and charismatic around girls. After graduating in 2017, Paul landed a job as an assistant coach for cricket and hockey. By early 2018, he took over the management of these sports teams. Despite feeling confident in his new role, Paul suddenly resigned and returned home to his family for unknown reasons. Back home, Paul pursued further education, earning a master's degree in sports management. During a conversation with old friends, he revealed that he had honed his coaching skills, which led to a lucrative job offer from his former employer. By early 2020, Paul returned to his old school. Upon his return to Australia, Paul reunited with a former friend, and they decided to split housing costs. Paul preferred shared living, despite being able to afford a solo apartment. Their economically priced apartment was in Kensington, a suburb of Sydney. Initially, the friends got along, socializing at bars after work. However, a few months later, tensions arose, and Paul decided to live alone due to their conflict. The Theson's son, Paul, felt isolated despite being constantly surrounded by people. His parents suspected he had not had a serious romantic relationship. In March 2020, an 18-month lockdown in Australia. Paul was stuck in the country, unable to visit his family due to the risk of infection. The strict quarantine measures affected every aspect of life, forcing Paul to rely on himself. By summer 2021, life had returned to normal. However, it became apparent that the isolation had taken a toll on Paul's relationships. When he resumed his activities, people noticed a change in his character and behavior. Paul bounced back, becoming a key player on the hockey team and maintaining an active lifestyle, even appearing in match advertisements. Paul's behavior became increasingly disturbing. Friends and acquaintances reported seeing him lash out in uncontrollable anger, a side of him they had never witnessed before. Rumors also circulated at school that he had an inappropriate interest in his female students, often flirting with them and making them feel uncomfortable. Despite this, Paul was still highly regarded for his coaching skills, which significantly contributed to the team's success in the Australian Hockey League. However, his personal life began to unravel when his girlfriend Lily ended their relationship after he was put on trial. The investigation into Paul's involvement in her murder quickly gained momentum. Surveillance cameras inside and outside the area where the body was found played a crucial role in identifying him as the prime suspect. The police also tracked his movements using his cell phone's GPS and contacted his service provider to determine his last known location. The police were also eager to find the victim's phone, hoping it would contain clues about the events leading up to her death. After tracing the locations of the devices, they reconstructed the timeline of events and found that Paul had purchased a hammer at a hardware store a couple of days before the attack. It appeared that Paul was consumed by anger and decided to confront the girl violently. Lily's innocence in the situation was clear, but the events that unfolded were as follows. On the morning of October 25th, Lily went to the university and then to her job in the afternoon. Meanwhile, her ex-boyfriend rented a silver Lexus and drove to the school, but he didn't enter the building because he had no classes. Instead, he waited in the car. After the students left the building, the perpetrator walked to the gym, hiding a hammer under his jacket. He waited for Lily to finish her training, then followed her when she went to freshen up and take a shower. This was when Lily was most vulnerable, and the perpetrator attacked her, striking her head. According to pathologists, her death was instantaneous, and she did not suffer. An hour later, he gathered Lily's personal belongings in a backpack and left the building. He got into his car and drove to Diamond Bay, where he disposed of the hammer in a garbage container. Security cameras recorded him at the reserve at 8:47 p.m. Paul's last known location, as tracked by investigators, was The Gap, a cliff in Sydney's eastern suburb of South Head. The Gap is a popular tourist spot, but it's also infamous for its history of suicides. At around 10 p.m., Paul used Lily's phone to send a message to someone called James, which would ultimately lead to the discovery of the girl's body. It's unclear why Paul did this. Possibly he felt remorseful and wanted to ensure the girl received help. Or maybe he was simply telling her parents where they could find their daughter. He made a brief emergency call an hour after the incident, but hung up. He then went to a cliff and took his own life, which had been a decision he had been considering for a long time. When the police arrived, they found the personal belongings of him and his former lover, as well as a rented car parked nearby. It seemed clear that he was no longer alive, possibly due to his inability to cope with his guilt or face the consequences of his actions. The priority was now to find his body. A search operation began on October 26th at 9 a.m., with police helicopters and boats patrolling the coastline and cordoning off the area around the cliff at Diamond Bay. However, no body was found on the first day. The next day, his body washed up on the rocks of the reserve. After an autopsy, Paul was officially declared responsible for Lily James's death. Although it was impossible to hold him accountable due to his own death, the criminal case was closed. His parents received his body and decided to cremate him and scatter his ashes in Sydney, rather than returning him to the Netherlands. Lily's funeral was held on November 17, 2023, at her former school in Hurstville, where around 500 people gathered to bid farewell to a loved one, friend, and coach. The school administration arranged a live broadcast of the ceremony. In line with Lily's lively and vibrant personality, her family requested that attendees wear bright colors instead of traditional dark attire. The ceremony was filled with heartfelt tributes to Lily, as speakers shared warm and sincere words about her. The James family expressed gratitude to everyone who had supported them during their difficult time. Outside the building, students and colleagues created a makeshift memorial featuring Lily's favorite flowers, accompanied by farewell letters as a sign of respect and admiration. After the investigation into Lily's tragic death was completed, the school management sent a follow-up email to parents, apologizing for the impact of the tragedy and assuring them that the incident was unforeseen and would not happen again. While many were shocked that a place of safety had been breached, the administration encouraged students to view this as an isolated incident and to continue their education with renewed enthusiasm. Renowned forensic psychologist Tim Watson-Monroe, an expert in analyzing the minds of both criminals and victims, was consulted about Paul's actions. His analysis revealed that Paul's behavior was characteristic of individuals with inflated self-esteem who cannot accept rejection. According to Monroe, Paul did not act impulsively, but rather deliberately and without remorse. Monroe believed that Paul took his own life to avoid taking responsibility and facing shame for his actions. He described Paul as a narcissistic individual with psychopathic tendencies. Monroe also distinguished Paul's case from the tragic tale of Romeo and Juliet, as their narratives were fundamentally different. Ultimately, Paul's pride and ego clouded his judgment, leading him to make devastating decisions. He failed to appreciate the love and companionship of Lily, and instead chose deceit and betrayal. In the end, Paul's selfishness resulted in the loss of Lily's life, as well as enduring suffering for both their families. His actions were a bitter repayment for the care and attention he received from those who loved him. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Suzanne Morphew. Suzanne Morphew was born on April 11, 1971, to Jean and Adrianne Alexandria, and grew up with her two brothers, David and Andrew. Those who knew Suzanne describe her as an intelligent, thoughtful, and caring friend. In 1998, while in high school, she met her future husband, Barry Morphew. After 6 years of dating, they got married. Barry was an exceptional baseball player and was signed with the Toronto Blue Jays. Meanwhile, Suzanne pursued a degree in education at Purdue University. However, Barry's sports career was cut short due to a serious injury, and he switched to a career in horticulture. Suzanne had been teaching for 4 years when Barry started his landscape company, which gradually gained momentum. The couple had 2 children, Mallory and Macy. They lived a picture-perfect life in Indiana until Suzanne was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. Despite beating cancer twice, in 2018, the Morphew family decided to move to Mayville, Colorado, for a fresh start and to be closer to their daughter Mallory, who attended Western State University. They settled into a stunning 7-acre property where Barry could hunt and continue his work as a contractor. He also became a volunteer firefighter. Suzanne retired from teaching and dedicated more time to her church and her new hobby, sports mountain biking. The Morphew family seemed perfect from the outside, but they had their secrets. It wasn't until May 10, 2020, that their problems came to light. That Mother's Day started off like any other at the Morphew residence. Barry and their daughters left the house, leaving Suzanne alone. Barry claimed he had a landscaping appointment in Broomfield, 3 hours away from Mayville by car. Meanwhile, the girls went on a camping trip. Barry and the girls planned to return home that evening to celebrate Mother's Day with Suzanne. However, when they didn't hear back from her, they started to worry. The girls sent her a message to wish her a happy Mother's Day, but got no response. This was unusual, since Suzanne was very active on social media. They expected her to be on her phone, especially since she was supposed to attend her best friend's daughter's wedding and share some photos. After several hours of no response, Mallory and Macy grew concerned and asked their neighbor, Martin Ritter, and his wife to check on Suzanne. Mrs. Ritter went to the Morphew house between 4 and 4:30 p.m. and found it empty. Barry's wife called him to explain the situation, and he advised her to check if Suzanne's mountain bike was still at the Morphew residence. If it wasn't there, he told her to contact the police, which is exactly what she did. The police arrived at the Morphew residence, and Barry, along with his 2 daughters, returned home, eager to learn about Suzanne's whereabouts and condition. A few hours into the search, the police discovered their first significant lead. 2 deputies found Suzanne's mountain bike near a steep ravine, not far from the Murphys' home. This suggested that Suzanne might have been involved in a crash. However, there were no signs of a struggle on the bike or in the surrounding vegetation, and no skid marks indicating that she had used her brakes. Despite the mountain bike being found at the bottom of a ravine with no damage, and no signs of struggle or disturbance to the surrounding vegetation, detectives suspected foul play. When presented with this evidence, Barry's reaction was unusual, and his subsequent explanation that a mountain lion must have moved the bike seemed far-fetched. Many people found Barry's behavior during the investigation into his wife's disappearance to be suspicious. In a private conversation with YouTuber Tyson Draper, Barry elaborated on his mountain lion theory. Notably, he was absent from the search parties organized by Suzanne's brother, Andrew, who was skeptical of Barry's account of the bike ride and suggested that Suzanne might have gone missing on May 9th instead of Mother's Day. As the investigation continued, suspicion shifted to Barry when Suzanne's helmet was discovered 1 mile from their home, precisely in the direction his truck's telemetry showed he had driven that morning. This discovery was particularly incriminating because it was in the opposite direction of the Broomfield construction site, which was his alleged destination that day. During the initial police interview, the suspect claimed he woke up to his alarm clock at 4:30 a.m. and drove directly to the Broomfield construction site. However, the telematic data from his Ford F-350 revealed that he drove 1 mile west before heading to the site. When confronted with this discrepancy, the suspect provided an explanation. He stated that he had gone scouting for elk that morning around 4:30 a.m. and was curious to see which direction they were headed so he could track them down later. He allegedly had a habit of tranquilizing elk and removing their antlers for sale. But when the officers questioned how he could have spotted elk at 4:30 a.m. if he was just waking up, he changed his story. He claimed he didn't set his alarm for 4:30 a.m. and woke up on his own. When questioned about the day of the disappearance, he stated it was one of the best days the couple had had in a while. He said he worked with a coworker in Salita that morning, returned early, went for a hike with Susan, and then they grilled steak and were intimate together. Barry claimed that he and his wife Suzanne went to bed together, suggesting it might have been the last time they saw each other. However, as we've established, Barry is not a trustworthy witness. When the police investigated, they discovered that Barry had lied about almost everything that occurred that night. The first indication that something was amiss came when investigators reviewed Barry's phone and vehicle data on May 9, 2020. Although Barry and Suzanne did spend the afternoon and evening together, the events didn't match Barry's story. The first significant discrepancy arose between 2:42 and 2:44. Phone records showed Barry making erratic movements around the property. When questioned, Barry claimed he was likely hunting chipmunks with tranquilizers at 2:47 p.m. Then, Barry turned his phone to airplane mode, which remained active until 10:17 p.m. Furthermore, the steak dinner he claimed to have shared with his wife was called into question when investigators found only one dirty dish instead of two. Later that night, more peculiarities emerged on the Morphew property. During their examination of the data, the police found several concerning details that raised suspicions about Barry's activities later that night. At 9:30 p.m., an hour after he claimed to have gone to sleep with his wife, his car was seen reversing backward from the driveway, moving 96 feet. Investigators thought this might be when he loaded her body onto his truck, if he was guilty. The records also showed that between 3:25 and 3:48, the door to his truck opened and closed over 80 times. Although this evidence was circumstantial, it suggested that Barry was not telling the police everything, prompting a closer investigation into the events of May 10th. Further investigation revealed that Barry had no legitimate reason to be in Broomfield that day. His company's contract was not set to start until a week later, so there was no project for him to inspect. Barry claimed that he had only visited the Holiday Inn, the job site, a local store for granola and water, and briefly stopped at McDonald's to clean his windshield. However, surveillance footage obtained by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation contradicted his account. Barry was caught on camera throwing away 5 trash bags near McDonald's and the Holiday Inn. When questioned about it, he gave a suspicious explanation, claiming he was trying to avoid waste disposal fees by cleaning his car himself. However, when officers inspected his car, his story fell apart. A co-worker reported a strong smell of bleach and chlorine in Barry's hotel room a day after Suzanne disappeared. Additionally, investigators found that Barry had changed his clothes multiple times that day. Despite these suspicious actions, the investigators initially found no clear motive for Barry's behavior. But when they dug deeper into their personal lives, they discovered a motive. Barry and Suzanne's daughter revealed that the couple's marriage was not as happy as Barry made it out to be. Text messages on Suzanne's recovered phone and personal belongings proved this. In fact, Suzanne was extremely unhappy in the marriage and talked about how Barry refused to consider divorce. Suzanne kept a list of grievances on her phone, detailing a pattern of physical abuse. She was afraid to be alone in a room with Barry and worried about his drinking. She also suspected him of infidelity and tried to protect her phone from him, fearing he would seize it. On May 20th, when the police searched the Morphew house, they found a pen that Suzanne had bought to catch her husband in the act. Ironically, it recorded her own infidelity, not his. The pen revealed that Suzanne was having an affair with a man named Jeff, a high school acquaintance. The affair allegedly started in 2018 and had lasted for about 1.5 years. Although Jeff seemed like an obvious suspect, the police were able to clear him of any involvement in Suzanne's disappearance. The investigators believed that Barry had discovered Suzanne's infidelity, and that a note she wrote 2 days before she vanished supported this theory. The note indicated that Barry had accused Suzanne of having a boyfriend. The spy pen was crucial evidence, but it was not the only important discovery made during the search of the Morphew house. The police also found a tranquilizer dart cap in the family's dryer, a spent bullet casing in the bedroom, a large crack in the door frame, and remnants of Suzanne's journal in the fireplace. When combined with telematic data, these findings suggested that Barry might have planned and carried out the murder of his wife, possibly killing her in the afternoon of May 9th, 2020. After texting her boyfriend 53 times and sending a selfie at around 2:10 p.m., Suzanne never used her phone again. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that the public learned Barry was a suspect in his wife's disappearance, when the police conducted a 2-day excavation of a construction site in Salida, one of Barry's job sites. In response, Barry released a strange video proclaiming his innocence. However, he wasn't arrested until May 5, 2021, nearly a year after the investigation began. Although the evidence against Barry was largely circumstantial, the prosecution seemed confident in their case due to his changing stories, repeated lies, and clear motive. Barry was charged with multiple crimes, including first-degree murder of his wife, tampering with physical evidence, possession of a dangerous weapon, and attempting to influence a public servant. Moreover, he was later charged with filing a fraudulent election ballot in Suzanne's name, claiming he didn't know it was wrong and that it would help Trump's campaign. Barry pleaded guilty to this charge and paid a $600 fine. In August 2021, a preliminary hearing was held to determine whether Barry Morse's case would proceed to trial. During this 4-day hearing, the prosecution presented their evidence and proposed a theory of what might have occurred. According to the prosecution, Barry murdered his wife on May 9, 2020, then dismembered her body in a hotel room. He allegedly disposed of the tools used and buried her body in an unmarked grave. However, the defense strongly challenged the prosecution's account, highlighting several inconsistencies. They pointed out that cadaver dogs were unable to detect any human remains in Barry's car or the hotel room where the alleged dismemberment took place. The defense also suggested that the dart bullet cover might have been planted as evidence. Furthermore, they noted visual discrepancies in the photos of the dryer, with one image showing the cap inside the dryer and another image showing it was not present. The defense argued that Barry couldn't have used his dart gun in the alleged murder because it was broken at the time. However, their strongest evidence was the discovery of partial DNA on Suzanne's car and bike helmet that didn't match Barry. This DNA actually matched evidence from 3 unsolved sexual assault cases in Chicago and Arizona, raising reasonable doubt about Barry's guilt. The discovery was significant, but it was only brought up during the hearing because the CBI investigator who collected the evidence went on military leave before following up on the lead. To make matters worse, the defense was never informed about the foreign DNA matches and only learned about them during the hearing. This meant the prosecution had withheld important evidence that could have helped the defense. Throughout the hearing, the defense argued that the presence of another suspect with a criminal record meant the prosecution didn't have enough evidence to convict Barry of killing his wife. They asked the judge to make a quick decision, but surprisingly, he delayed it, citing the large amount of time and resources invested in the case. On September 7th, the judge ruled that the case against Barry would proceed, setting his bail at $500,000. Barry was released from county jail on September 20th, 2021, just 9 days before the trial was scheduled to start. However, in a surprising turn of events, the prosecution suddenly filed a motion to dismiss all charges against Barry without prejudice, allowing them to potentially reopen the case if new evidence emerges. Given the lack of concrete evidence proving Barry's guilt and the prosecution's misconduct, securing a conviction would have been a difficult task. Moreover, the prosecution had missed several crucial deadlines, resulting in sanctions that prevented 14 key witnesses from testifying at the trial. The news of the dismissal shocked the public, and Barry was pictured leaving the courthouse with a wide smile, accompanied by his 2 daughters. On September 22, 2023, investigators unearthed multiple shallow graves in Moffett, Colorado. During an investigation, Suzanne's remains were identified using her dental records and chemotherapy port. Surprisingly, over 50 miles away from the initial search area, focused on the mountains surrounding Barry's property. The discovery of her body raises questions about Barry's potential involvement in the murder. Although the police are certain Barry's truck was not in Moffett on May 9th and 10th, some suggest he could have had an accomplice in disposing of Suzanne's body, allowing him to travel to Moffett, bury the body, and return. If investigators obtained a subpoena for Barry's phone and car data for an extended period, they might be able to link him to the location where Suzanne's remains were found. For now, Barry appears to be cleared of suspicion, but the police and district attorney's office continue to investigate the case. The 12th Judicial District's district attorney told CNN that the case remains open and no further comment can be made until more information becomes available, while offering condolences to Suzanne's family. Barry's lawyer has spoken out strongly since the body was found, suggesting that Suzanne might have been a victim of a serial killer because her remains were discovered in a graveyard with many other bodies. She thinks the police wrongly accused Barry and hopes they will eventually admit their mistake. Meanwhile, Barry has filed a $15 million lawsuit against the prosecutors, sheriff's departments, and investigators, claiming they wrongly accused him of being involved in his wife's disappearance and death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Katrina Ashley Edlund Smith. Katrina Ashley Edlund was born on July 16, 1982, to her mother Vicky. She had two siblings, an older brother named Chad and a younger sister named Miranda, who looked up to Katrina as a role model. As children, Miranda would often try on Katrina's clothes and use her makeup, admiring her older sister and wanting to be just like her. As the years passed, Katrina and Miranda formed a strong bond, becoming more like best friends than sisters. Katrina grew up in Musney Park, Illinois, a suburban community outside the city, after her parents separated, and she lived with her mother. Those who knew Katrina described her as a kind, fun-loving person who cherished the holiday season and enjoyed giving humorous gifts to her friends and family. She was deeply involved in her church and had a strong desire to help others, always willing to lend a hand to those in need. Despite her happiness, Katrina longed to find love and thought she had found it when she met Todd Smith at a bar when she was 20 years old. Todd, a self-employed financial planner, had 3 daughters and worked from home. He met Katrina, and despite their differences, they clicked. Todd's flexible schedule allowed them to travel frequently. After 3 years together, Todd proposed to Katrina, and she happily accepted. They planned a small wedding in a local park, and Katrina was thrilled about their future. She loved Todd's daughters and was eager to build a life with him. Katrina's family, including her mother Vicky and siblings Chad and Miranda, adored Todd and thought he was an excellent match for Katrina. They trusted him to take care of her and believed the couple was meant to be. After marrying, Katrina and Todd settled in Musney Park and started their new life together. On October 20th, 2012, Katrina, 30, called her mother and said she was house-sitting for a friend. During their conversation, she mentioned she would visit for dinner on October 24th and had news to share. Vicky suspected that something was amiss, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Before ending their phone call, Vicky promised Katrina that she would cook her favorite meal, chicken and dumplings. Tragically, Vicky would never get the chance to keep that promise. Days later, Katrina vanished, and Vicky would never lay eyes on her again. On October 23rd, at 5 p.m., Todd, Katrina's husband, called 911 to report her disappearance. He told the dispatcher that Katrina was house-sitting for a friend and that he had been trying to reach her for hours without success. When he drove to the house, he found it empty. Katrina's siblings, Miranda and Chad, were alarmed when they heard the news. Chad, who was undergoing military training in Oklahoma, immediately flew to Illinois to help search for his sister. On the evening of the 23rd, a concerned citizen notified the police about an abandoned vehicle near Rock River. The caller reported that the car was not parked on the road, but rather in an easement, suggesting it had been hastily abandoned. When authorities arrived to investigate, they ran the license plate and identified it as belonging to Katrina Smith. Upon inspecting the vehicle, the officer found no signs of a struggle or any trace of Katrina herself. Katrina's mother, Vicky, was adamant that her daughter's disappearance was a clear indication of foul play when she learned that Katrina's car had been abandoned in an unfamiliar area. It was the only logical explanation to Vicky. If Katrina's car was found in that location, someone must have taken her and left the car there. Following the discovery of her car, Katrina's case was officially categorized as a missing person, and the search efforts intensified significantly. On October 12th, at 11 p.m., the police took Todd Smith in for a formal interview at the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department. During the interview, Todd told the detective that he last saw his wife Katrina on October 10th, not October 22nd. He stated that Katrina had come home briefly to do laundry in preparation for a big job interview the following day. According to Todd, while the laundry was in progress, Katrina left to go to the mall to make a purchase and returned home at 8:30 p.m. Todd reported that Katrina briefly returned home before leaving again to make one last stop. She had told him she needed to complete an errand before returning to the house she was watching for a friend. The next day, after Katrina was declared missing, Todd made an emotional appeal to the media, pleading for her safe return. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in tears as he begged for anyone with information about her whereabouts to come forward. As the search for Katrina continued, search teams composed of officers and volunteers worked tirelessly to find her. They focused their efforts on a nearby park, where Katrina's car had been abandoned, hoping to find evidence or clues about her disappearance. When Katrina's brother Chad arrived in Illinois from his Army training in Oklahoma, he joined the search for his missing sister at the park. With his military background, Chad took charge of the search party. He created a map, divided the volunteers into teams, and coordinated their efforts to ensure a thorough search. As the search continued, the officers employed a methodical approach, using dogs and walking in straight lines to cover as much ground as possible and detect any potential evidence, no matter how small. Meanwhile, Katrina's mother Vicky focused on spreading awareness about her daughter's disappearance. She posted missing person flyers at gas stations, convenience stores, and lampposts throughout the town, hoping to reach as many people as possible. Despite her overwhelming grief and fear of finding her daughter's body, Vicky was determined to keep searching for Katrina, even if she couldn't participate in the physical search herself. Todd, Katrina's husband, was overcome with emotion during this difficult time. Chad, trying to be supportive, urged Todd to stay strong and focused on finding Katrina. He stood by Todd's side, sympathetic to his brother-in-law's grief. Meanwhile, the police investigation turned up some disturbing clues. An officer found Katrina's purse near her abandoned car, and as he searched further down the road, he discovered more of her belongings, including her cell phone and bloody towels. It was clear that someone had deliberately discarded Katrina's possessions as they drove away from her car. Unfortunately, the police still had no idea where Katrina was, but they feared the worst. The recovered items were sent to the crime lab for analysis, and the police awaited the results with bated breath. As the police searched for clues, they explored every aspect of Katrina's personal life to understand what might have led to her disappearance. They wanted to know if she had any relationships outside her marriage, was involved in gambling or drugs, and what her daily routines were like. To gather this information, they interviewed her friends and family. Everyone they spoke to described Katrina as a kind, responsible person who always put her duties first and avoided anything risky. Her loved ones said she was dedicated to her job and had a strong work ethic. They also reported that she never showed any signs of addiction or irresponsible behavior. The people who knew Katrina described her as a loyal partner and a hard worker who always did the right thing. During the investigation into her disappearance, a woman came forward with an interesting clue. She claimed to have seen a blue car, similar to Katrina's, parked on a bridge over Rock River on the night she vanished. The trunk was open, and someone was kneeling behind it. Although the witness couldn't describe the person's gender or race, her tip led the police to suspect that Katrina might have been a victim of foul play and ended up in the river. However, they still needed concrete evidence to support this theory. The police continued to investigate Katrina's disappearance, looking into potential motives and suspects. Despite seeming to have a happy marriage, her husband Todd was still a person of interest. As the authorities knew that hidden conflicts or secrets can exist in any relationship, their inquiry led them to a teenager in town who had previously shown an unhealthy obsession with Katrina. Earlier in the year, Katrina had confided in friends about the boy's behavior, including allegations of voyeurism, such as spying on her through her bedroom window. This had made Katrina increasingly anxious at the time. Although the boy's activities had stopped when he left for college, the police wondered if he might have returned and resumed stalking Katrina. They devoted significant resources to finding him. 3 days into the search, crucial clues were discovered on Katrina's cell phone, which was being examined at the crime lab. The phone proved to be a crucial source of evidence for the investigators. By examining Katrina's cell phone records, they uncovered a wealth of information, including her text messages, call logs, pictures, videos, and GPS location data. This information enabled the police to reconstruct a more accurate timeline of Katrina's activities. The investigation revealed that Katrina was having an affair with a co-worker, Guy Gabriel. Initially, they had met after work and developed a connection that eventually turned romantic. However, a background check on Guy Gabriel exposed a troubling history of domestic violence. Additionally, the detectives found text messages in which Guy Gabriel demanded that Katrina leave her husband Todd for him. Given Guy Gabriel's violent past and his messages to Katrina, he became the top suspect in her disappearance. The police suspected that Guy Gabriel might have reacted violently towards Katrina because she refused to leave her husband for him. When Katrina's family discovered her affair with Guy, they were shocked and disbelieving. The seemingly perfect couple, Katrina and Todd, had hidden a dark secret. The news of Katrina's infidelity devastated Todd, who was unaware of the affair until the police investigation. Guy Gabriel was questioned by the police at the station, and although he appeared nervous, he admitted to the affair, but denied any involvement in Katrina's disappearance. He claimed to have been at work on the night she went missing. During the investigation, the police uncovered an incident that had occurred 2 weeks before Katrina's disappearance. Witnesses reported that a black Volkswagen Jetta had sped through the parking lot of the auto shop where Katrina and Guy worked, causing a scene during lunchtime. A mysterious driver in a VW Jetta threw a stack of flyers out of the car's sunroof, scattering them among the employees gathered outside. The flyers contained a derogatory remark about Katrina and Guy Gabriel's relationship, but the identity of the driver remained unknown. Meanwhile, the police questioned Katrina's hairstylist, who shared that Katrina had confided in her about feeling unsafe and threatened. Katrina had even considered buying a gun for protection, and had become paranoid about being followed. She had gone so far as to take her phone to a store to check for a tracking device, suspecting that someone was monitoring her movements. At the police garage, crime scene investigators searched Katrina's car for clues and used a special chemical called luminol to detect blood. They found a large amount of blood in the trunk. Meanwhile, a firefighter pulled a mysterious object from the water, which turned out to be a severely decomposed female body. The body was difficult to identify due to its condition. At the medical examiner's office, dental experts compared the body's teeth to Katrina Smith's dental records and confirmed that the body belonged to her. The autopsy revealed that Katrina's cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Katrina's family was devastated by the news, and her mother, Vicky, was in disbelief. The police cleared the teenage boy who had been allegedly stalking Katrina as a suspect after verifying his alibi. The police then turned their attention to Guy Gabriel, Katrina's boyfriend outside of her marriage. Guy provided an alibi, claiming he was at work during the time of Katrina's disappearance and murder. His managers and co-workers corroborated his alibi, and the police cleared him as a suspect. Although Guy was no longer a suspect, the police asked for his perspective on who may have hurt Katrina. Guy revealed that Katrina's husband, Todd, exhibited controlling behavior and encouraged Katrina to leave her marriage. The police investigated Katrina's marriage and discovered several concerning details, including Katrina's desire to divorce Todd, her meeting with a divorce attorney, and her separation from Todd. The police suspected Todd of being behind the mysterious flyer incident at Katrina's workplace. Their suspicion grew stronger when they discovered that Todd had test-driven a black Jetta, similar to the car involved in the flyer incident, around the same time it occurred. When the police informed Katrina's family that Todd was the prime suspect in her murder and was already in custody, they were shocked and devastated. Katrina's mother, Vicky, was particularly affected, feeling physically ill at the thought that Todd could be responsible for her daughter's murder. The police also discovered that Todd's financial investment company was facing legal troubles, providing a potential motive for the crime. Katrina was the sole breadwinner for her family since Todd was unemployed. The police suspected that Todd might have motive to kill his wife, as he would gain access to their funds if she left him and their daughters. To gather evidence, the police obtained a search warrant for the couple's home. During the search, they found a baseball bat in the garage with brays of blood on it, which led them to believe it might be the murder weapon. The autopsy revealed that Katrina's injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma, suggesting a bat was used. A DNA test confirmed that the blood on the bat was Katrina's, linking the bat to the crime. The police also found a clean area under the car, which seemed suspicious. Further examination revealed that the bloodstains matched Katrina's DNA profile. 30 days after Katrina's murder, Todd was arrested and charged with her killing, bringing relief to her family. At his trial, the prosecution presented evidence that Katrina had recently visited a divorce attorney, indicating marital problems. On the night of the murder, Katrina had gone to Todd's house to do laundry for a job interview the next morning. The prosecution alleged that Katrina told Todd their marriage was over, triggering his violent reaction. They claimed that Todd grabbed a baseball bat, killed Katrina in the garage, and then disposed of her body by throwing it off a bridge at Rock River. The jury found Todd guilty and sentenced him to 55 years in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Maria Munoz. Maria Munoz was born on January 25, 1989, in Puerto Rico to Marisol Rodriguez and Jorge Luis Munoz. She was the middle child of three, along with her siblings Maris Al Munoz and Peter Hernandez. Tragically, Maria's mother passed away when she was young, leaving her to take on a significant caregiving role for her brothers. It was during this time that Maria met Joel Pellet, a nursing student who was 11 years older than her. Despite their age difference, they got married in 2011. After their wedding, they relocated to Laredo, Texas, where Joel landed a high-paying job as a nurse anesthetist at a local hospital. Their new financial stability allowed them to live a life of luxury, complete with expensive cars and exotic vacations. By the time Maria was 31, she had left her job to focus on raising their two young sons. As a devoted stay-at-home mom, Maria cherished every moment with her children and supported her husband Joel, who was 40 at the time. Maria was a devoted mother who spent quality time with her children, taking them to the park and reading to them before bed. She also made time for her own interests, like playing the piano. Despite her happiness at home, she harbored a long-held dream of returning to school and becoming a nurse again. From the outside, it seemed like Maria and her husband Pellet had a perfect relationship. He would frequently share photos of his family with friends and colleagues, boasting about how wonderful they were. However, beneath the surface, things started to take a turn in 2018, after Maria gave birth to their second son. Those close to Pellet began to notice a change in his behavior. Pellet underwent a physical transformation, losing weight and gaining muscle. He also became more outgoing and flirtatious with other women, behavior that didn't align with what was expected of a married man. On social media, he started removing photos of his wife and children, replacing them with pictures of himself alone. This new online persona made it seem like he was single and carefree, without the responsibilities of a husband and father. In 2020, Maria's life was turned upside down when she discovered her husband, Pellet, was having an affair with a surgical nurse named Janet Arando. Despite her suspicions, finding airline tickets he had purchased for a trip to Europe with his mistress was the final confirmation of his infidelity. Maria was consumed by heartbreak, depression, and a deep sense of betrayal. She felt lost and alone, struggling to come to terms with the fact that her 10-year marriage was built on lies. To cope with her emotional turmoil, Maria began seeing a therapist who prescribed medication to support her mental health. As Maria grappled with her emotions, she found solace in writing journals, using them as an outlet to process her thoughts and feelings. However, the situation continued to deteriorate, and on September 19, 2020, Maria confronted her husband's infidelity head-on by visiting Janet's house, where she found Pellet's car parked in the driveway. Maria confronted Pellet at his house, forcing him to choose between her and Janet. He chose Janet, and during the ensuing argument, Janet called the police. However, Maria and Pellet had left by the time the police arrived. The police then called Maria while she was driving with Pellet, and they could hear him yelling at her in the background. When they got home, Pellet's anger escalated, and he punched a hole in Maria's car windshield, displaying a concerning level of force and anger. The next morning, Maria sent Pellet a text message stating her intention to hire a lawyer to help resolve their situation. Pellet replied, suggesting they handle things without lawyers, as he believed it would be too expensive. However, just a few hours later, Pellet appeared to have a change of heart. He sent Maria an emotional email expressing his deep sadness and inner turmoil. He requested a sincere and calm conversation with Maria, free from arguments. Maria agreed to meet with him, and they scheduled a meeting for 5 p.m. the following night. Before meeting her friend Yasmin Martinez, Maria was extremely anxious and messaged her about their plans. Unfortunately, the encounter ended in a terrifying way. On September 22, 2020, Maria's husband, Pellet, frantically called 911, saying his wife might have taken some prescription pills and was not breathing. Officer crews arrived at their house around 1:40 a.m., with his body cam recording the scene. Pellet was found performing CPR on Maria at the top of the stairs near their bedroom, still wearing his green hospital scrubs. Their 2 sons were sleeping nearby. When paramedics arrived, they took over CPR efforts while first responders worked to save Maria's life. An officer asked Pellet about the pills Maria had supposedly taken. He quickly retrieved a bottle from the nearby bathroom medicine cabinet and handed it to the officers. The bottle was later found to contain a prescription for clonazepam, a medication used to treat acute anxiety, panic attacks, and epilepsy. Benzodiazepines, like Kazam, calm the nervous system to produce a relaxing effect. However, when an officer examined the pill bottle, he discovered that it was prescribed to Pellet, not Maria. What caught his attention was that the bottle had been returned to the medicine cabinet, which is unusual in overdose cases, where the bottle is typically found near the person. The officer's body camera footage showed Pellet picking up the pill container from the floor and putting it in his pocket. This raised suspicions, as it seemed like Pellet might be hiding something. Another suspicious finding was a needle catheter on the stairs, which was unusual given the presence of 2 young children in the home. The investigators found even more disturbing evidence: syringes and IV equipment neatly packed in a medical bag. While Pellet's profession as an anesthesia nurse might explain the possession of these tools, their presence outside a clinical setting sparked important questions for the investigators. Pellet told the officers that Maria had been struggling with severe depression and her mental health had been declining. He said she had taken pills to cope with her emotions, but unfortunately, despite the responders' best efforts, she couldn't be revived and was pronounced dead at 3:58 a.m. After Maria's death, the officers questioned Pellet further in the kitchen. He stated that he and Maria had a conversation earlier that day, became intimate, and then he took a shower. When he came out, he found Maria asleep. Pellet went downstairs for an unspecified reason, and when he returned, he found Maria unresponsive and not breathing. The officers observed Pellet's strange behavior, including excessive sweating and his inability to answer simple questions about the incident. The officer noticed that Pellet was sweating excessively, more so than anyone else, including the first responder who had been trying to revive Maria for 2 hours. This heightened suspicion and led to him being taken to the police station for further questioning by Sergeant Liz Mata. At the station, Pellet was left alone in an interrogation room, which was being recorded by video cameras. When officers reviewed the footage, they were astonished to see Pellet's sudden outburst. He began screaming, crying, hitting the walls, and throwing furniture around the room. The commotion was so intense that people in the nearby hallways and rooms were frightened by the loud noises coming from the room. As a result, Sergeant Louis Matt entered the room at 4 a.m. to speak with Pellet. During their conversation, Pellet opened up again about the events surrounding Maria's death. In a shocking revelation, Pellet also confessed to having an affair with a woman named Janet. He revealed that he had left the family home 5 months prior and was living with Janet at the time of Maria's death. He shared that he had been involved with Janet for 2 years, and Maria had been aware of the affair beforehand. On the night Maria died, her husband visited their family home to talk to her about their marriage. After their conversation, they were intimate. He thought she had fallen asleep in her room, but when he checked on her 10 minutes later, he found her unresponsive. The husband confessed to the officer that he had given Maria clonazepam, a medication prescribed to him to help with her anxiety and depression. However, he couldn't provide details about how many pills she had taken or how many were left in the bottle. Despite being questioned, the husband was unable to provide any additional information to help clarify what had happened. He was released, and an autopsy was performed on Maria just 8 hours after her death. The timing of the autopsy meant that any cause of death should still be detectable in her stomach contents. However, the autopsy results revealed a surprise. No traces of pills were found in Maria's stomach. Instead, the medical examiner discovered a small red pinprick mark on the inside of her elbow, which suggested that she may have been injected with something. The discovery of the mysterious mark on Maria's hand led investigators to explore its potential connection to her death. During their investigation, they found a journal in Maria's home, which she had kept to cope with her anxiety and depression. The journal proved to be a crucial piece of evidence, revealing Maria's innermost thoughts and experiences. Investigators learned that Maria loved her husband dearly and wanted to preserve their family, despite his desire to be with someone else. She expressed her desperation to escape her emotional pain, writing, "I want it to stop. My past haunts me, and I don't want to be sad anymore." Through her journal entries, Maria documented the heartbreak she felt when her husband left their home in Laredo, leaving her to care for their 2 young sons alone. The journal, along with recordings on her cell phone, exposed her husband's abusive behavior and chronicled her emotional journey from grief to healing, and eventually, a newfound optimism for the future. Maria Munoz wrote in her journal the day before her death, "What is it that I want? Number 1, move forward." Her journal entries revealed a strong desire to live and move forward with her life, with no mention of suicide or plans to end her life. This led investigators to rule out suicide as a possible cause of death, and they continued to search for answers. Dr. John Hunsinger, Maria's previous employer and an anesthesiologist, became aware of the autopsy findings and contacted the lead detective Cruz. Dr. Hunsinger recommended a comprehensive toxicology screening, which the investigators conducted. In January 2021, the toxicology test results were finally received by investigators Sergeant Luis Matt and Cruz. Contrary to Maria's boyfriend Pellet's claim, Maria did not have clonazepam in her system. The report revealed a surprising discovery: the presence of 7 surgical drugs including morphine, Demerol, Versed, propofol, ketamine, Lian, and Narin. These medications are typically used during surgical procedures, with propofol and ketamine often administered intravenously as sedatives and for pain management. The investigation into Maria's death took a significant turn when toxicology results revealed high levels of propofol in her system. This was shocking because propofol is a highly controlled substance, typically only accessible to medical professionals working in anesthesiology. As a nurse anesthetist, Pellet would have had access to propofol, leading investigators to suspect him. Dr. Hunsinger, who worked with Pellet and had experience with propofol, was stunned by the extreme amount found in Maria's body, the highest he had ever seen. Given Pellet's profession, investigators believed he would know the exact dosage required to sedate or overdose someone. Furthermore, a small mark on Maria's arm suggested she may have been injected with a substance. With the toxicology report, Pellet's suspicious behavior, and Maria's journal, authorities felt they had sufficient evidence to arrest Pellet for Maria's murder. They quickly obtained an arrest warrant, and De La Cruz went to apprehend Pellet, who surprisingly did not resist. He was taken into custody, marking a new phase in the investigation. As police prepared to question him about Maria's death, Pellet would finally face the consequences of his actions. The trial began on March 21, 2023. During the legal proceedings, both the prosecution and defense presented their arguments. The prosecution team, an all-female group referred to as Maria's team, used Maria Munoz's personal journal entries to build a strong case against the defendant Pellet. This evidence helped to portray Maria as a devoted wife and mother to the jury. Prosecutors portrayed Maria as a loving, intelligent, and vibrant individual, evident through her personal journal. They alleged that her husband, Pellet, drugged her by slipping substances into her drink, causing her to become unconscious. While she was incapacitated, they claimed he injected propofol into her arm. The prosecutors also suspected that Pellet deliberately delayed calling 911, ensuring that emergency responders would be unable to revive Maria upon arrival. The prosecutors believed Maria's journals provided insight into the challenges she faced, fueling their determination to seek justice for her. During the final arguments, Pellet's lawyer, Roberto Bali, claimed his client wanted to reconcile with Maria before her death. Bali pointed to the medical examiner's report, which stated that Maria's cause of death remained uncertain, and argued that there was insufficient evidence to prove Pellet's responsibility in her death. Bali highlighted a crucial detail. Pellet had given Maria a drug called Narin, commonly used to reverse overdoses, on the night she died. Bali also revealed that both Pellet and Munoz struggled with drug addiction. Furthermore, he argued that Maria had willingly taken the drugs without being forced, as there were no signs of force on her body. However, an investigation into Maria's social circles, friends, and family revealed that she was not a drug addict. In fact, Pellet was the only person who could have supplied her with the large amount of propofol found in her system. The authorities managed to convince Pellet's girlfriend, surgical nurse Janet Arredondo, to testify against him. She disclosed that Pellet had admitted to giving Maria something to calm her down and confirmed that he had brought drugs, including propofol, home from work. The jury delivered a verdict in under an hour, finding Pellet guilty of murdering his wife, Maria, after a 9-day trial on March 30th, 2023. On April 27th, 2023, Pellet received a life sentence for the murder conviction, plus an additional 10 years and a $10,000 fine for tampering with evidence. As of now, Joel Pellet is serving his life sentence at a Texas Department of Criminal Justice, facing the consequences of his heinous actions. His imprisonment serves as a testament to accountability and a tribute to Maria's life, ensuring that her memory is honored through the pursuit of truth and justice. The reason behind Joel Pellet's brutal act of killing his wife, Maria Munoz, is not entirely clear. However, according to the prosecution, it is believed that he was driven by a desire to end his marriage and start a new life with his girlfriend, Janet Arredondo. Regardless of the motive, Pellet's actions were inexcusable and justice had to be served. The jury's verdict has brought a sense of closure to this tragic case, confirming that heinous crimes like this will not be tolerated. The conviction serves as a powerful reminder that those who commit such atrocities will face the full weight of the law. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Mary Catherine Higdon. Mary Catherine Higdon was born in 1994. Mary was a lively and cheerful child who loved making people laugh with her humor, impressions, and playful antics. She had a special bond with her pet frog, which she'd often take on walks around town. Mary was an outdoorsy person who enjoyed exploring nature and appreciating its beauty. She was also passionate about performing, often putting on shows for her family that showcased her creativity and imagination. Her family saw great potential in her and thought she had a bright future ahead. As she grew older, Mary developed a strong interest in firearms. She learned to handle guns responsibly and appreciated their power. She became a skilled marksman and continued to develop her skills. During her high school years, Mary met her partner, Stephen Freeman, who would become the love of her life. Stephen was born on January 1st, 1995, in Griffin, Georgia, where he grew up with his parents and brother. He had a happy childhood, surrounded by a loving family and many friends who described him as laid-back, kind, and helpful. Stephen enjoyed spending time outdoors and exploring nature. Stephen was particularly close to his parents, but he shared a special bond with his mother. When she graduated from college after returning to school, Stephen wrote her a heartfelt letter expressing his admiration for her achievement. In the letter, he praised her hard work and determination, saying he looked up to her every day and loved her more than words could say. Stephen had immense respect and appreciation for his mother, which was clear in the way he spoke about her. After meeting in high school, Stephen and Mary Catherine formed a strong bond, united by their passion for outdoor activities like hiking, camping, fishing, and hunting. Their shared love of nature became the foundation of their robust relationship. After graduating from high school, the couple decided to take the next step by moving in together in Griffin, Georgia. Living together in their own space thrilled Mary Catherine and Stephen. What's more, Stephen's mother welcomed Mary Catherine into their family, treating her like a daughter. Every Sunday, the couple would visit Stephen's parents for a big family dinner, a tradition that brought them all closer together and solidified Mary Catherine's place within the family. Stephen's friends were initially hesitant about his relationship with Mary Catherine, but as they got to know her better, they began to appreciate her positive influence on Stephen's life. They saw how happy and joyful she made him, and they admired her enthusiasm for the outdoors. Stephen and Mary Catherine had different occupations. Stephen worked as a metal worker, specializing in roof repairs. Mary Catherine, on the other hand, had 2 part-time jobs. She worked as a teacher's assistant at St. George's Episcopal School, a preschool in Milner, Georgia. Additionally, she was employed at a sporting goods store, where she sold guns. Interestingly, one of Stephen's close friends, Thomas Skinner, was also a colleague of Mary Catherine's at the sporting goods shop. Mary Catherine learned about basic gun safety while working at a sporting goods store, which taught her how to properly hold, load, and shoot a gun. Similarly, Stephen was enthusiastic about firearms and owned several shotguns and rifles that he used for hunting and target practice. He also kept a Glock 42 handgun at home for self-protection. After 5 years together, Mary Catherine and Stephen were still living in their apartment in Griffin, Georgia, by the summer of 2018. However, their relationship took a tragic turn on August 1st when Mary Catherine made a distressing 911 call, marking the end of their high school romance. Mary Catherine frantically called the dispatcher, screaming that she had accidentally just shot her boyfriend. The police quickly responded to the emergency call and arrived at the apartment shared by Mary Catherine and Stephen. They found Mary Catherine in a state of panic, crying and hyperventilating as she knelt beside Stephen's motionless body. She repeatedly wailed that she could not lose him, her voice filled with anguish and desperation. As the police carefully moved Mary Catherine away from Stephen, they were able to assess his condition. They discovered that he had been shot in the chest, but miraculously, he was still alive. The police immediately called for an ambulance to rush Stephen to the nearest hospital. At the emergency room, a team of skilled doctors worked to save Stephen's life. Despite their best efforts, his condition continued to worsen. Unfortunately, the severity of his injury ultimately proved fatal, and Stephen succumbed to his wounds. After Stephen was taken to the hospital, Mary Catherine accompanied the police to the station for a formal interview. Mary Catherine explained what happened on the night she accidentally shot Stephen. She said she was giving him the gun because he normally kept it beside his bed for safety. However, she clarified that they never loaded the chamber of their guns at home. During the police questioning, officers detected the smell of alcohol on Mary Catherine's breath. As they pressed her for more information, her story changed. Initially, she said she handed Stephen the gun, but later claimed she tossed it to him. The police was skeptical of her changing story, knowing that a gun wouldn't fire randomly just because it was tossed. Someone had to pull the trigger. The police investigation revealed that Mary Catherine must have been pointing the gun directly at Stephen's body for the bullet to have struck where it did, given the location of his gunshot wound. During her interview, Mary Catherine admitted, "I did it out of anger." But unfortunately, the recording equipment malfunctioned at that exact moment, and her words were inaudible. Despite the missing recording, the police still had strong evidence pointing to Mary Catherine's intention to harm Stephen. At the couple's apartment, they found signs of an intense argument, including scattered food throughout the house. Additionally, police records showed that officers had responded to 5 domestic disturbance calls at the couple's residence in the past year. The police also discovered that the gun used in the shooting was loaded on the night of the incident, contradicting Mary Catherine's claims. These findings collectively led the police to conclude that Mary Catherine had intentionally shot her boyfriend Stephen. The police found cooking grease residue on the gun and magazine, leading them to believe Mary Catherine, who was cooking dinner at the time, had loaded the weapon. After Mary Catherine shot Stephen, the police questioned his friends to learn more about their relationship. According to his friends, Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship was marked by constant fighting and toxicity. They reported that the couple frequently had intense, heated arguments. Mary Catherine was described as possessive and verbally abusive towards Stephen, with signs of mental instability that heightened the tension between them. Whenever Stephen tried to create distance by leaving their apartment, Mary Catherine would barrage him with relentless texts and calls, forcing him to block her. One of Stephen's friends revealed that Stephen had confided in him about Mary Catherine's history of threatening him with a gun. Specifically, she had pulled a firearm on him at least 3 times in the past. Despite this, Stephen chose not to report these incidents to the authorities because he was worried about Mary Catherine getting into trouble. Stephen's friends stressed that his top priority was always Mary Catherine's well-being, even when it put his own safety at risk. When Stephen's friends learned that Mary Catherine had accidentally shot him, they were skeptical because they knew she was knowledgeable about handling firearms. In fact, just 3 months prior to the shooting, Stephen had texted a friend to say that Mary Catherine was running wild outside, screaming and attempting to shoot both him and herself. Stephen told a friend that Mary Catherine had previously pointed a gun at him, but the latest time, her eyes frightened him, making him think she might actually pull the trigger. By July 2018, Stephen was exhausted with Mary Catherine's behavior and considered leaving her. In July, Stephen planned to secretly move to another town while Mary Catherine was out, without telling her. He was afraid of how she might react if she knew he was leaving. Just 2 days before Mary Catherine fatally shot Stephen, the police found a series of revealing text messages from July 30th. The conversation started with Stephen sending Mary Catherine a friendly message. "Good morning, beautiful. Don't forget." Mary Catherine responded with, "Have a great day." Stephen replied, "You too, love you." However, the night of July 31st, Stephen avoided Mary Catherine's texts and calls, as they were in the middle of a fight, and instead spent the evening at a friend's house. On the night of August 1st, Mary Catherine was at home preparing dinner when she realized Stephen wasn't there. She contacted Stephen's mother, who told her that he was with his friend. Angry and feeling betrayed, Mary Catherine drove to his friend's house, determined to confront Stephen. When she arrived, she saw Stephen sitting in the passenger seat of his friend's truck. Mary Catherine pulled up alongside and began yelling at Stephen, who tried to calm her down, promising to come home soon. Although Stephen's friends claimed that Mary Catherine had pointed a gun at Stephen on multiple occasions, Mary Catherine vigorously denied these allegations. She maintained that she never pulled a gun on Stephen. However, Mary Catherine did admit to having threatened to take her own life with a gun on several occasions. In a later interview, Stephen's mother shared her insight, believing that one of the main reasons Stephen stayed with Mary Catherine for so long was because she frequently threatened to harm herself. Stephen was afraid that Mary Catherine would follow through on her threats if he decided to leave her. However, on the night of the incident that led to Stephen's shooting, Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen was the one who became aggressive and violent. According to her, Stephen threw the dinner she had prepared in her face. Mary Catherine stated that she only picked up the gun to defend herself and scare Stephen away. She wanted him to leave the apartment, but Stephen allegedly lunged at her, which frightened her. As she backed away, the next thing she knew, Stephen was bleeding from the chest. At the time of the shooting, Mary Catherine didn't tell the police her version of events because she was embarrassed to admit that Stephen had a history of violence towards her. She claimed that Stephen had hit her in the past and was controlling. She even recalled an incident where Stephen kicked her out of bed with such force that she hit her head on the door frame. However, Stephen's friends had a different perspective on their relationship. They claimed to have witnessed Mary Catherine being physically aggressive towards Stephen, stating that she had slapped him hard in the face. Mary Catherine's sister contradicted her account of their relationship, revealing that she had seen bruises on Mary Catherine's arm 2 weeks before Stephen was killed. When questioned, Mary Catherine confided in her sister that Stephen had grabbed her, causing the injuries. After investigating Stephen's death as a murder, the authorities charged Mary Catherine with murder, aggravated assault, and firearm possession during a felony. The prosecution offered her a plea deal, proposing a life sentence with possible parole if she pleaded guilty. However, Mary Catherine declined the offer, opting to stand trial and assert her innocence. At the trial, Mary Catherine maintained that she shot Stephen in self-defense, denying the charges against her. The trial, which began on June 17, 2019, nearly a year after Stephen's death, exposed the tumultuous relationship between Mary Catherine and Stephen. Mary Catherine's lawyers argued that she acted out of genuine fear, citing Stephen's history of violence and abuse. Mary Catherine testified that she was the victim of Stephen's controlling, manipulative, and dangerous behavior, which included physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual abuse. She described being hit, humiliated, and degraded by Stephen on multiple occasions, and shared specific incidents where he smacked her around and verbally abused her. Mary Catherine explained that Stephen's constant threats and abuse left her feeling trapped, fearful for her life, and constantly walking on eggshells to avoid triggering his anger. She presented evidence in the form of text messages, including one where Stephen threatened to punish her, which she said meant he would physically harm her. Another text message showed Stephen's explicit threat to hit her back twice as hard if she defended herself. Mary Catherine's defense team also presented messages that supported her allegations of sexual assault, including a text where Stephen mentioned his red room, which she described as a place where they engaged in violent and aggressive intercourse. Mary Catherine testified that Stephen sexually assaulted her on 2 occasions, including one after they returned from a vacation to Walt Disney World, where he allegedly ignored her pleas to stop and intensified his efforts instead. The defense presented over 60 pages of text messages from Stephen, which showcased his pattern of verbal assaults and threatening behavior towards Mary Catherine. These messages included disturbing images and captions, such as one showing Stephen holding a dead fish, accompanied by the caption, "This is you." Another message showed Stephen's violent threats towards Mary Catherine after she cheated on him, where he wrote, "I'm going to wreck you for wrecking me." The defense also alleged that Stephen's drug and alcohol addiction contributed to his violent outbursts. Mary Catherine maintained that she was the one who ended the relationship, not Stephen, and that her actions on the night she shot him were a result of her desperation to escape the abuse. Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen had reacted violently to some news and had threatened to attack her, causing her to defend herself by grabbing a gun. She said the last thing she had told him before shooting was to get out of her house. However, Stephen's friends and family disputed Mary Catherine's allegations, describing Stephen as a friendly and caring person. Stephen's mother said she was unaware of any threatening messages her son had sent Mary Catherine and did not condone such behavior. Although she acknowledged that Stephen may have said some angry things, she believed he did not mean them. In court, the prosecution questioned Mary Catherine about her story, pointing out that she had never reported any alleged abuse by Stephen. They also presented evidence that Mary Catherine had searched for violent and explicit content online just hours before the shooting, which she claimed was to find ways to make Stephen happy. The prosecution argued that Mary Catherine had changed her story about the shooting multiple times, and that a text from Stephen suggested she had pointed a gun at him before. Additionally, Stephen's friends testified that they had witnessed Mary Catherine's violent behavior towards him. After 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Mary Catherine not guilty of murder, assault, and other charges. The verdict surprised Stephen's loved ones, who felt that justice had not been served. Later, the jurors revealed that they believed Mary Catherine had intentionally killed Stephen, but there was not enough evidence to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. This lack of evidence made it difficult to determine whether the shooting was murder or self-defense. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Heidi Firkus. Heidi Marie Eriksson was born on December 14, 1984, to John and Elinda Eriksson, and was the youngest of their 3 children and their only daughter. She was known for her playful and artistic nature, and lived her life to the fullest. After graduating from high school in 2003, she continued her education at the University of Northwestern in Roseville. During this time, She was a regular attendee at Calvary Church in the city, where she had been involved since her early years. It was at Calvary Church that she met Nick Furcus, with whom she shared the role of youth group leaders, serving their community with dedication and passion. Nicholas Furcus was born on February 25, 1983, to Julie and Steve Furcus. He was a driven and ambitious young man who dedicated himself to his work as the director of operations at a reputable carpet cleaning company. Known for his well-rounded personality and strong work ethic, he had found his true match in Heidi, whom he met at their shared place of worship, Calvary Church, in 2005. At the ages of 22 and 20, respectively, Nick and Heidi made the joyful decision to take their relationship to the next level. Surrounded by their loved ones and the familiar walls of the church that had witnessed the blossoming of their love, they exchanged vows, sealing their commitment to each other. To their friends and community, Nick and Heidi's marriage appeared perfect. They shared a love for travel, biking, and their church. They often hosted dinner parties for their loved ones. Heidi had recently started working at a financial firm where her father was employed. Their bond seemed to be growing stronger with time. However, behind closed doors, a different story was unfolding. On the morning of April 25, 2010, Heidi called 911 from her home in St. Paul, Minnesota, reporting a break-in. Only 38 seconds into the call, Heidi yelled no, and a gunshot was heard. 65 seconds later, Nick used Heidi's phone to contact the dispatcher, saying, "Please, someone just broke into my house and shot me and my wife." Nick was overcome with grief, repeatedly crying and begging for help, saying, "Oh my Heidi, my wife is dead, please get here." He also shouted no in despair. When the police arrived, they found Heidi unresponsive on the kitchen floor with a gunshot wound to her back. Nick was beside her, still on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, despite having been shot in the upper left leg. He was extremely upset and told the police that one or two intruders had broken into their home. According to Nick, he had grabbed his shotgun and tried to escape with Heidi through the back door, heading towards their detached garage. However, the intruder managed to take the shotgun from him and shot both Nick and Heidi. Sadly, Heidi was pronounced dead at the scene, her life cut short by the tragic events. Nick, meanwhile, was rushed to the hospital for treatment and was later questioned by the police while still in the hospital. Police asked Nick why he and Heidi left the safety of their bedroom to face the potential danger. Nick explained that they were trying to escape through the back door. After receiving medical treatment for his wounds at the hospital, Nick was released just 3 hours later and was interviewed again at the police station about the incident. At the police station, Nick provided a detailed account of what happened. He recalled watching a movie with Heidi and having a glass of wine before going to bed around midnight. Nick said he woke up around 6:10 to 6:15 a.m. when he heard the screen door open and someone fiddling with the doorknob. The investigators questioned Nick about locking the deadbolt, and he admitted that he and Heidi usually made sure to lock it, but he believed he had forgotten to do so that particular night. After hearing the noises, Nick retrieved his shotgun from the upstairs closet, which he had brought up from the basement a month ago because he noticed it was starting to rust. Although the shotgun was initially empty, Nick loaded it when he heard the noises. He then woke up Heidi, instructed her to call 911, and told her to leave the house and go to the garage where their cars were parked. Nick also shared that he and Heidi had a safety plan in place in case of trouble, which was to go to the garage where their cars were parked. Nick, who is right-handed, was holding a pair of jeans in his right hand and a shotgun in his left hand as he walked behind Heidi toward the garage. They stopped at the front door, where Heidi retrieved her wallet from a table. Suddenly, the door burst open and a tall, dark-skinned man rushed in. The intruder wore a dark hooded sweatshirt with the hood pulled tightly around his face. Nick dropped the jeans, and the intruder grabbed the shotgun barrel. The two men then engaged in a physical struggle. During the altercation, the gun fired, and Nick said his finger accidentally slipped onto the trigger. He believed he hit Heidi in the back, causing her to collapse immediately. They continued fighting over the shotgun, which fired again, hitting Nick in the upper thigh and causing him to fall to the ground. The intruder then fled out the front door. Nick told investigators that Heidi was unresponsive, and he eventually lost consciousness. Nick told the police that his house was supposed to be foreclosed the next day, and he and his partner Heidi had planned to inform their parents and friends about their situation on the same day. According to Nick, they had fallen behind on their bills, and their house had been foreclosed on and sold to someone else. As a result, they were required to vacate the premises, but they hadn't shared this information with anyone. Their plan was to pack up their belongings on Sunday and Monday morning, leaving some items in the garage to collect later, and then find someone to stay with temporarily. However, their plans were disrupted, and their peaceful home was left with an air of tragedy. The lives of Nick and Heidi were forever changed by the devastating events of that morning. The investigation continued, with law enforcement securing the area and interviewing residents. None of the neighbors reported seeing anyone leaving the Furcus residence. However, one neighbor, Brendan O'Connell, who was looking after kittens in a nearby house, told the authorities that he heard an argument followed by gunfire. Nick begged for mercy, claiming a shooter had attacked him and a woman. After talking to police, Nick's lawyer hired an artist to update the sketch, details emerging: an African-American male, 40 to 60 years old. The police initially searched for an unknown African-American male intruder based on Nick's description, but found no evidence or witnesses to support his story. Despite a thorough investigation, no one was arrested or charged in connection with Heidi's death, leaving the case unsolved for many years. Years later, a surprising revelation came to light. Over 10 years had passed since Heidi's murder, and Nick had seemingly moved on with his life, marrying Rachel and starting a family. However, when financial troubles resurfaced, Rachel began to suspect that Nick was hiding something. Rachel's concerns about their financial situation and Nick's evasiveness sparked her curiosity, prompting her to investigate Nick's past. As she dug deeper, she uncovered secrets and inconsistencies that made her question everything she thought she knew about her husband and his possible involvement in Heidi's death. Rachel was unaware of the financial troubles her husband Nick was hiding, similar to those he had faced with his previous wife Heidi years earlier. Her concerns prompted her to contact the authorities, which renewed interest in Heidi's murder case. Investigators began looking into Nick's second marriage to Rachel, whom he married in 2012. However, by the time Rachel spoke with the authorities, she had already divorced Nick due to his growing financial problems. Before their 2019 divorce, Rachel had recorded a conversation where she confronted Nick about his deception. She told investigators that Nick was repeating the same patterns he had with Heidi, including failing to pay property taxes. In fact, she had seen a letter warning that they would be evicted by 2020 if the taxes weren't paid. Rachel's decision to contact the police with her suspicions set off a chain of events that would once again bring the Heidi Fergus murder case into the spotlight. Sergeant Nicole Sipes, assigned to the case, listened carefully to Rachel's concerns and began re-examining the evidence. Sergeant Nicole Sykes of the St. Paul Police Department was determined to solve Heidi's murder. To uncover the truth, she made a bold decision to ask the FBI to analyze the 911 call audio recordings. She hoped to find crucial clues that could explain what happened on the night of the murder. The FBI's analysis yielded a surprising result. It found no evidence of a third person being present during the incident. This discovery contradicted the husband's earlier statement to the police, leaving Sergeant Sipes and her team puzzled. If only Heidi and her husband were in the house, what led to her death? The absence of a third person increased suspicion around the husband's possible involvement in the crime. Sergeant Sykes was more determined than ever to uncover the truth and bring justice to Heidi and her grieving family. The FBI's findings opened up a new avenue of investigation, which Sergeant Sykes was committed to pursuing with increased intensity. The investigators obtained financial documents that disputed Nicholas Fergus's earlier statements, further implicating him in Heidi's murder. Fergus's account of the events surrounding Heidi's death kept changing. Initially, he claimed that an intruder took his gun and shot both him and Heidi. Later, he said that the intruder didn't take the gun, but his own finger accidentally pulled the trigger, hitting Heidi in the back. The crime scene investigation yielded no signs of a struggle, such as overturned furniture or marks on the walls, contradicting Fergus's account. Forensic analysis of the scene also disputed Fergus's version of the shooting, particularly the trajectory of the bullet that struck Heidi. Furthermore, Heidi's 911 call made no mention of an intruder, and there was no evidence of a break-in or intruder at the crime scene. This lack of evidence led investigators to suspect that Fergus had planned to cover up his involvement in Heidi's death. As a result, an arrest warrant was issued for Nick Fergus on May 19, 2021, over a decade after Heidi's death. A SWAT team arrested Fergus at his home in Mounds View. The surprise arrest of Nick stemmed from Rachel's suspicions and the tireless efforts of Police Sergeant Nicole Sipes. This sudden development astonished many who thought the case had stalled and would never reach a resolution. As the legal proceedings progressed, the case details would be re-examined, and the truth about that fateful night would gradually emerge. At the trial, Nick Fergus maintained that he was innocent and pleaded not guilty. Many of his family members, including his father, claimed to believe in his innocence, stating that Nick's love for Heidi would have prevented him from committing such a violent act. However, the jury disagreed with their assessment. On February 10, 2023, the jury delivered a shocking verdict after deliberating for 10 hours. They found Nick, the person Heidi trusted most, guilty of her brutal murder. This outcome left everyone who knew Heidi in a state of shock and disbelief. The prosecution built a strong case against Nick by showing that he was facing severe financial difficulties, which they argued led him to kill Heidi to avoid shame and conflict. They questioned the truth of Nick's claim that a home invader was responsible, suggesting that he fabricated the story to divert attention from himself. The prosecution presented convincing evidence, including the lack of signs of forced entry and inconsistencies in Nick's account. Notably, there was no DNA or physical evidence to support the presence of an intruder, which raised serious doubts about Nick's story. Prosecutor Rachel Craker argued that Nick's inability to accept the truth of his financial deception led him to commit a shocking crime, sacrificing Heidi's life to preserve his reputation. In contrast, Nick's defense attorney, Robert Richmond, countered that it didn't make sense for Nick's financial problems to suddenly drive him to murder. Nick claimed that killing his wife would somehow boost his reputation, but this statement is illogical. After intense debates during the trial, the jury finally reached a verdict that would determine whether Nick would be held accountable for Heidi's death. The jury carefully considered the evidence, emotional testimonies, and legal arguments before delivering a unanimous verdict. Nick Fergus was guilty of first-degree murder. On April 13, 2023, the judge handed down the most severe sentence possible: life in prison without parole. Although found guilty, Nick still insists he had nothing to do with Heidi's death. He maintains his innocence even after being sentenced. When he was sentenced, Nick said, "I understand the pain and loss felt by everyone here today. Justice has been served, but it came at a great cost. A broken family, a betrayed community, and a life cut short." The verdict brought a sense of closure to Heidi's family and friends, but it also left them with the painful realization that the man they thought they knew was capable of such a heinous act. So, you must be thinking, where is Nick now? Nick is currently serving his life sentence at the Minnesota Correctional Facility, located in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Here's what drove Nick to commit the tragic act. The motive behind the killing remains unclear, but there are clues. In June 2009, Nick received foreclosure papers on their house, which was then sold at a sheriff's auction the same month. 10 months before Heidi's death, eviction proceedings began in February 2010, with a hearing scheduled for March 8, 2010. Nick attended the hearing alone. Initially, the lockout was set for April 9, 2010, but Nick called the attorneys, claiming his grandmother was in the hospital and about to die. He requested the lockout be rescheduled for April 26, 2010. However, investigators found no evidence to support this claim. When questioned, Nick said Heidi was aware of their financial troubles and that they had made plans together to move out of their foreclosed home and start fresh elsewhere. The truth behind a tragic event was finally revealed by prosecutors. A husband, Nick, had been hiding their severe financial struggles from his wife, Heidi. Tragically, before she could discover the truth, he took her life. Instead of being honest with his wife and working together to find a solution, Nick chose a devastating path. According to prosecutors, Nick's motive for killing his wife was his shame and fear of revealing their financial problems, which included $118,000 in credit card debt and 22 months of late mortgage payments. By killing Heidi, Nick avoided confronting the consequences of his own deception. In the end, justice was served, but Heidi's loved ones still suffered immense pain and loss. Unfortunately, no legal punishment could undo the harm or bring back the vibrant life that was cruelly taken. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Graciela Graciela. Graciela Graciela was born on October 6, 19, in Mexico, to a working-class family who sought a better future for their children. To achieve this, her parents made the decision to immigrate to the United States, ultimately settling in Hermiston, Oregon. As Graciela was very young at the time of the move, she has no recollection of the challenges associated with relocating. Upon reaching school age, Graciela attended Leavit High School, an institution that predominantly served students from low-income backgrounds. The school provided all students with free meals, reflecting the socioeconomic status of its student body, of which 66% were Hispanic. It was here that Graciela's sociable nature and innate charm enabled her to effortlessly form friendships among her peers. After graduating, she proceeded to enroll in the business department at Blue Mountain College. From a young age, Graciela had always dreamed of becoming a hairstylist and owning her own beauty salon. With determination and hard work, she believed she could make her dreams a reality. By February 2006, she had achieved her goal and became the owner of Cuz Beauty Salon. Graciela's talent and charisma quickly made her a well-known figure in society. As the salon's owner, she always presented herself well, which added to the salon's positive image. Her passion for her job and understanding of the latest beauty trends ensured a steady stream of clients. Over time, some of these clients became close friends, who were always welcome at her home. Graciela was highly respected in the town, not only for her professional success but also for her interesting and happy personal life. Her first love, with whom she had 2 daughters, Annabelle and Gabriella, also known as Gabby, was someone she met in her youth. Although the relationship didn't last long, and the father of her children left the family, Graciela didn't let this setback hold her back. Instead, she focused on self-improvement and continued to move forward as a single mother. Graciela later earned a degree in cosmetology. She then met a kind-hearted man of Mexican descent named Romero Sanchez, and they got married. Her children from a previous relationship reported that she never regretted this decision. Her husband was caring not only to her but also to her children, treating them as his own. The family later welcomed 2 more children, Arthur and Jacob. Although he had biological sons, Graciella's husband still affectionately referred to Annabelle and Gabriella as his girls. Gabby considered her stepfather to be her real father, as he consistently supported, protected, and cared for them. The couple prioritized keeping their family united and happy, raising 4 children together. This did not deter Graciella from pursuing her passion. Instead, she would often take her children with her to professional meetings. The family developed a lovely tradition of traveling together, exploring new cities, local attractions, and cultural features. They also prioritized staying connected to their roots, frequently visiting Mexico and enjoying quality time together. Everyone made a genuine effort to make each other happy. However, after 17 years of marriage, the couple decided to separate. Graciella and her ex-husband chose not to burden each other with their dwindling feelings, opting to preserve the respectful relationship they had built over the years. Even after the divorce, they maintained a warm and strong connection. The father remained involved in the children's lives, regularly seeing them and sharing custody of their youngest son with Graciella. The other children were grown and lived on their own, but they remained close to their parents. They would get together to celebrate holidays and often sought each other's advice. Graciella handled her divorce well, remaining optimistic and confident, thanks in part to her ex-husband's kind and understanding behavior during this challenging time. On November 9, 2019, Romero made an unexpected visit to Annabelle, Graciella's eldest daughter. Annabelle was surprised to see her mother's new husband show up unexpectedly. Romero told Annabelle that Graciella had disappeared. According to Romero, he and Graciella had met with Jacob the previous night. Afterward, Romero returned home and went to bed beside Graciella, who was already asleep. However, when he woke up in the morning, Graciella was gone. He searched the house but couldn't find her. Romero tried to contact Graciella by calling and texting her, but she didn't respond. He went to Annabelle's place hoping she might have some information about Graciella's disappearance. Annabelle, however, had no idea where her mother was. She was shocked not only by the news of her mother's disappearance but also by Romero's reaction. He was in tears and seemed genuinely upset. Annabelle found this odd because Romero had never shown any strong emotions around them before, only indifference. Romero mentioned that Graciella had been acting strangely and might have found someone else. He admitted she might have needed a break from their relationship and wasn't sure if she was truly happy with him. However, Annabelle found his words insincere and his tears overly dramatic. She started to worry about her mother and found Romero's behavior suspicious. Romero had previously avoided talking to Graciella's children, but suddenly reached out to them. After he left, Annabelle told the rest of the family what happened. They gathered at Graciella's house to figure out what was going on. Her car was still parked in the driveway, which was unusual since she would have likely taken it if she were leaving Romero. The house was also spotlessly tidy, which was out of character for Graciella, who preferred a more creative and chaotic space. If she were planning to leave, her belongings would have been scattered around the room. Graciella spent a considerable amount of time in front of the mirror, carefully selecting an outfit for the day. However, she surprisingly left all her treasured jewelry at home, including her favorite rings and necklaces that she wore daily. This unusual behavior raised concerns among her family members, who couldn't help but imagine worst-case scenarios, including the possibility of her fleeing. While searching the house, Gabby stumbled upon something peculiar, a large, heavy blanket in the washing machine. This was unusual because their mother, Graciella, always emphasized the importance of not overloading appliances. It was likely that Romero, who normally didn't participate in household chores, had washed the blanket. This sparked suspicion that he might be trying to conceal something. It was later discovered that along with Graciella, several important items had gone missing from the house, including her passport, driver's license, and mobile phone. On November 11th, Annabelle went to the police station to report her mother, Graciela, missing. However, she was surprised to find that Romero, Graciela's husband, had not informed the police about her disappearance, despite knowing about it since November 9th or possibly earlier. As a result, Annabelle became the first person to file a missing person report for her mother. Romero's distant personality had been a concern for Graciela's family since they met him. Graciela had met Romero at her beauty salon, where he was a client, after her divorce. Their initial friendship eventually developed into a romantic relationship. However, when Graciela introduced Romero to her family, they noticed his aloof and cold demeanor. Annabelle and her sister, Gabby, tried several times to connect with Romero, but he did not reciprocate, leaving Graciela's children puzzled by his behavior. They initially attributed it to individual personality differences, especially compared to their mother's previous relationships. They were eager to understand their mother's partner and what motivated him. At times, he seemed strange and aloof to them, and they struggled to comprehend how someone as lively and joyful as their mother could be drawn to someone so serious and reserved. Despite their reservations, they respected her decision. When their mother shared the news of her upcoming wedding, everyone rallied around her, particularly the girls, who wanted to see her happy and loved. On the wedding day, guests couldn't help but notice Romero's haughty demeanor and restraint. Some even perceived him as excessively possessive, as he dominated the bride's attention. When Graciela's young children came to congratulate the newlyweds, Romero responded with disdain rather than warmth and affection, making it clear that he didn't want to share his wife's attention with anyone, not even her own family. After that, Graciela's relatives struggled to hide their genuine opinions about Romero. Annabelle even went so far as to say she didn't consider him a stepfather, let alone a father figure. The family simply wanted to have a normal relationship, like those found in any civilized household. Following the wedding, Graciela and Romero moved in together, along with her youngest son Jacob, into Graciela's home. Jacob shared that shortly after the wedding, Romero started behaving as if he was the sole owner of the house. The boy recalled that the initial honeymoon phase was brief, and soon the family started to fall apart. He observed that his mother initially tried to establish personal boundaries, but being non-confrontational, she quickly gave in to Romero's demands. This seemed to suit Romero, who had a quick temper and never apologized first. To avoid creating tension in the household, Graciela often conceded to Romero's wishes. As time went on, it seemed she realized she had rushed into the marriage without fully thinking it through. In private conversations, Graciela confessed to feeling trapped and suffocated in the relationship. Her husband exerted control over her, never allowing her to go anywhere alone. Despite this, she never expressed any desire to leave the abusive relationship, suggesting she was still in love with Romero. Everyone realized that Graciela was in a relationship with the wrong person. It became apparent that her partner, Romero, was jobless and financially dependent on her. The Graciela family, who valued hard work, found it frustrating that Romero was always by Graciela's side without any apparent reason. Romero was a master manipulator who kept a close eye on Graciela, monitoring her interactions, including her friendships with other women. He would either prevent her from going out or show up unexpectedly, as if checking on her loyalty. His extreme jealousy was suffocating. Graciela felt embarrassed by his behavior, which led her to isolate herself socially, only interacting with her family. This had a negative impact on her professional life, as her job required frequent client meetings and attending industry events. Those close to Graciela noticed a significant change in her demeanor. She looked sad, worn out, and had lost her usual cheerfulness. It was clear that she was unhappy. Even her children observed the changes in her mood and appearance, as well as her loss of independence. They discussed their concerns among themselves and concluded that, although they didn't like Romero, he was Graciela's choice, and they had to respect her decisions. Other relatives shared the family's distrust of Romero. However, no one knew how to intervene or offer support. The couple's issues were serious enough to require professional help. Gabby had once suggested this to her mother, but Graciela insisted on handling her personal life independently. In 2018, Graciela suddenly announced that she would relocate her beauty salon to her home, citing convenience. Her family was skeptical, as she had never mentioned this plan before, despite running the salon for 12 years. Some clients noted that Romero often hung around the salon, creating tension and disrupting the usually warm atmosphere. While some thought Graciela made the move to solve a problem, others suspected that her jealous husband was behind the decision. Despite the initial doubts, Graciela remained enthusiastic about the change, saying it allowed her to spend more time with Jacob and Romero. By the end of 2018, she and her husband were remodeling a room for the salon, but the project took longer than expected and wasn't completed until May 2019. Although the salon was closed temporarily, Graciela's reputation remained intact, and rumors of the studio's reopening attracted a long queue of clients, including new ones, months in advance. Graciela was thrilled with her professional success but became increasingly private about her personal life. Return to the moment before of Graciela's disappearance. Another incident raised concerns about Graciela's safety. She asked her daughter Gabby to pick her up, which was unusual. But she claimed everything was fine and said she was just having a disagreement with her husband. When they met up, they spent time together and Graciela seemed to relax. She smiled and told Gabby not to worry, saying that couples' arguments are normal and can actually bring people closer together. Despite this, Gabby couldn't shake off her worries and remained uneasy about her mother's situation. After Annabelle contacted the police, the relationship between Graciela's family and Romero rapidly deteriorated. He offered an explanation for his wife's disappearance, suggesting that she might have wanted some time alone or could have left with another man, and he believed she would soon return. This was his standard response to anyone inquiring about the situation. However, the police took the report seriously and initiated an investigation, considering the possibility that Graciela could have been a victim of a crime. They began by searching her home, where they found that only a few personal items were missing, with nothing else seeming out of the ordinary. The police also interviewed Graciela's children, her husband, and others close to the family, including her ex-husband. Although everyone expressed skepticism about Romero's behavior, the investigation did not uncover any significant information. Romero cooperated with the detectives, allowing them to search his home, participating in interrogations, providing his DNA, and undergoing a polygraph test. Despite his cooperation, the police did not have sufficient grounds to arrest him, so the investigation continued. Analysis of Graciela's phone records revealed her last known location was near a bridge in Washington on November 9 at 12:30 p.m., when the signal stopped after her phone was turned off. Her bank accounts and social media remained inactive. Despite questioning hundreds of witnesses and checking all her frequent locations, investigators found no signs of her. The investigation deemed her disappearance suspicious due to the complete lack of evidence. For months into the investigation, the Hermiston police publicly stated that they had no confirmed information about Graciela's last sighting. Although Romero didn't report Graciela missing, the authorities didn't accuse him of anything. The police's stance frustrated Graciela's relatives, causing them to reduce communication with law enforcement. The family eventually stopped receiving weekly updates, forcing Graciela's children to contact the police station directly for information. As of March 2020, there were no new developments in Graciela's case. In an effort to revive the investigation, Graciela's family reached out to the media, hoping to raise public awareness and gather information. They believed even small details could be crucial. Gabby, a family member, expressed the family's frustration and disappointment with the police's lack of progress in the case. The Graciela family urged investigators to focus on finding Graciela, as they suspected foul play due to the state of her belongings and the unusual circumstances at home. It was unclear who would harm her, as she had no known enemies. Her family knew she wouldn't leave without contacting them, and the lack of communication suggested something was seriously wrong. The family also requested a new detective team, citing concerns of bias and collusion with Romero, whom they believed was somehow connected to the case. The family pointed out numerous inconsistencies in the investigation. It was found that Romero's phone had been turned off on the day his wife went missing, and his actions didn't seem like those of someone who was worried about a loved one disappearing suddenly. The Graciela family asked for Romero to be arrested. Police Chief Jason Edmiston quickly responded to these claims. He agreed that Mrs. Graciela's disappearance seemed suspicious and might involve something criminal. He said this was just one idea, but promised that the investigation would stay fair and be based on evidence and facts. Edmiston also denied that Romero had any connections to the police that might affect the case. Edmiston mentioned that false information was spreading and making the investigation harder. He said the case was ongoing and that some information had to be kept secret. The police also asked the FBI for help. Edmiston expressed frustration that people were criticizing the police without understanding how complicated the law is. At the same time, Gabby started a fundraiser to hire a private investigator. This move was seen as criticism of how the police were handling the case, suggesting they weren't doing their job well. 1 year after Graciela's disappearance, her family and friends held a memorial event to honor her memory and pray for her safe return. They lit candles and posted signs outside the police station, urging authorities to continue searching for her. In September 2023, a significant development in the case occurred when Romero Sanchez, Graciela's husband, was severely injured in an attack. There was speculation that Mason Graciela, Graciela's brother, was involved in the incident, but details and any potential consequences for Mason were not disclosed. It appeared that Graciela's family had become frustrated with the police's lack of progress in investigating Romero, leading to a potentially frightening outcome. Graciela's disappearance remains an unsolved mystery, leaving her family in unbearable uncertainty that's taking a devastating toll on their health. Her children are left with only prayers, hoping for clarity and justice, unsure if she's alive. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Antonia Barra. Antonia Barra was born on December 3, 1999, in Temuco, Chile, to a wealthy family. She was the youngest of 5 children, with 2 older brothers, Sebastian and Ignacio, and 2 sisters, Catalina and Carla. Antonia was particularly close to Catalina, whom she considered her best friend and confidant. Her parents valued education and encouraged their children to pursue their interests, including sports and music. As the youngest child, Antonia was especially loved and spoiled by her parents. Despite this, she was a diligent student and dreamed of studying tourism and traveling the world. At the age of 15, Antonia met Martin Pradines on social media in 2015. Martin was 8 years older than Antonia and lived in the same city. He was divorced and had a child from a previous marriage. Little is known about Martin's early life, except that he was born in February 1992 in Temuco to Ivan Pronis and Paula Dare. When Martin was 20, he got a girl from his school pregnant, and to avoid scandal and punishment, he married her. However, the marriage ended shortly after the birth of their child. Martin and Antonia were acquaintances who knew each other from socializing with young people on social networks between 2015 and 2017. However, their relationship remained purely platonic. After Antonia graduated from high school and enrolled in university, she relocated to a different city, and they lost touch. At university, Antonia focused on her studies in the travel industry, formed new friendships, and explored new hobbies. Martine was no longer on her mind. During her breaks from university, Antonia would return to her hometown but primarily stayed in touch with her family, including her parents and siblings. During her time at university, Antonia developed a close bond with a fellow student named Consuela Herb, and they became nearly inseparable. She also started a romantic relationship with a student named Rodrigo Aguad, which lasted for approximately a year. However, they got into a dispute at the beginning of the new semester in September 2019 and decided to take a break from each other. Antonio had recently gone through a breakup and was feeling down. Luckily, the Chilean national holiday was just around the corner, offering a long weekend and a chance to take her mind off things. She and her best friend decided to attend an electronic music festival in the charming town of Pucón. They carpooled with 3 classmates, using Consuela's car. As it happened, close friends of Antonio's family owned a summer house in Pucón, and since the owners were out of town, they kindly offered Antonio and her friend the use of their house, even providing them with the spare key. Upon arrival, the group split up, and they friends settled into the spacious and cozy house, looking forward to a relaxing weekend getaway. On the evening of September 18th, Antonia ran into Martine while walking around the city, and they struck up a conversation. As it turned out, Martine was also in town for the festival with his friends and was staying in a large rented house just outside the city center. They hit it off and made plans to meet up the next day at a party at a popular nightclub. Antonia called her parents to fill them in on her plans, and her father warned her to be careful and not to drink too much. Antonia laughed it off and promised to be responsible. The next day, Antonia and her friends spent hours getting ready for the party, choosing outfits and doing their makeup. Before heading out, they shared a bottle of wine and then took a taxi to the club. When they arrived, they ordered a bottle of champagne at the bar and drank it together before hitting the dance floor. It was after midnight when Martine and his friends arrived at the club. Antonia was already quite drunk by then, but she continued to drink and dance with Martine. According to her friend, Consuela, Antonia was advised to slow down, but she didn't listen. At one point, Consuela lost track of Antonia and spent half an hour searching for her. When she finally found her, Antonia was in another room with Martine, barely able to stand due to her intoxication. Consuela saw her classmate Benjamin Morales at the club and asked for his help in getting her friend Antonia home. However, Antonia refused to leave, saying the night was still young. A short while later, she started to feel unwell, and her friends took her outside for some fresh air. After she felt a bit better, she returned to the club. Consuela went to Antonia later that night and told her that she was exhausted and ready to head home. However, Antonia declined, wanting to stay and continue having fun. Consuela then left the club, giving up on convincing Antonia to leave with her. She took a taxi home and went straight to bed. Benjamin saw Martine escorting Antonia out of the club, holding her because she was swaying from side to side. According to Benjamin, Antonia was too drunk to fight back, and Martine took advantage of her state. They waited near the entrance for a while, allowing Antonia to recover a bit. Soon, Martine's friends arrived and suggested they continue partying at their rented house. The company ordered a taxi, but Martine and Antonia decided to walk, as she was unwell and disoriented. Surveillance cameras captured their walk, showing the man supporting a drunk student who was trying to break free from his grasp. Along the way, they stopped at a 24-hour supermarket, where Martine purchased beer. Inside the empty store, Martine attempted to kiss she, but she pushed him away and turned her back on him. It was clear she was uncomfortable, but her intoxication left her unable to resist or escape. Martine, being stronger, continued to lead Antonia, and they eventually arrived at the rented house around 8 a.m. The people in the living room saw that she was upset, but she was too drunk to clearly communicate her distress. Despite Antonia's obvious unease, Martine continued to hug and try to kiss her. The other friends, also heavily intoxicated, failed to intervene. Eventually, they retreated to a bedroom, where the man assaulted she while she was in a dazed state. Antonia was confused and disoriented as Martine ignored her attempts to resist and stop him. After the incident, he rejoined his friends in the living room and continued the party, leaving Antonia alone in the bedroom. Later, around 9 a.m., she managed to call Benjamin, but her speech was slurred and she was crying uncontrollably, making it hard for him to understand her. She was unable to explain what had happened or where she was. Benjamin became concerned and called Consuela, telling her that Antonia was in trouble and needed help. Antonia then called Consuela herself, struggling to communicate, and eventually found out her location, prompting Consuela to go to her aid. When Consuela met Martine at the doorstep, she asked him what had happened, but he just smiled and claimed that everything was consensual. However, when Consuela found her friend, Antonia, in one of the rooms, she was shocked by her condition. Antonia was crying and begged to be taken away from the place as soon as possible. They left shortly after and went home, where Antonia immediately took a shower. Despite her friend's advice to preserve the evidence and report the incident to the police, Antonia insisted that no one should ever find out what had happened. She tried to act normally when she spoke to her parents later that day, hiding her true emotions. The next morning, Antonia and her friends returned to the student dormitory. In the aftermath, Antonia struggled to cope with the trauma. She tried to forget the nightmare and resume her normal life, attending classes and socializing with friends. However, only Consuela noticed that Antonia was not okay. As time passed, Antonia's mental state deteriorated, and she gradually fell into a deep depression. Antonia was traumatized and didn't want to talk to anyone about what had happened to her. She refused to file a police report, fearing that it would only spread the news and make things worse. However, rumors about her began to circulate quickly. They would whisper, point, and laugh at her. One of her classmates even had the audacity to ask her about the rumors in front of everyone. However, what sent Antonia over the edge was a phone call from Rodrigo, her ex-boyfriend, with whom she still had strong feelings and had been holding on to the hope of rekindling their relationship. During the call, Rodrigo repeated all the rumors he had heard and told Antonia that he never wanted to see her again. Antonia broke down in tears, trying to defend herself and explain that the rumors were not true. But Rodrigo was unforgiving, using derogatory language to describe her and calling her promiscuous before hanging up. This conversation was devastating for Antonia, and she couldn't cope with the emotional pain. On Saturday, October 12, 2019, Antonia went to her parents' house, seeking comfort and solace with her family. Concern for Antonia's well-being grew as her relatives noticed a deep sadness in her eyes, despite her claims that everything was okay. Later that evening, she posted old childhood photos on social media, accompanied by a distressing message. The following day, after dinner with her family, Antonia retreated to her room on the third floor. Her sister Catalina checked on her about an hour later, but Antonia asked to be left alone, saying she wanted to sleep. Catalina granted her wish, turned off the light, and bid her a loving goodbye before leaving the room. 2 hours passed before their mother, Marcella, came to Antonia's room to announce that dinner was ready. After knocking on the door with no response, Marcella entered the room and initially thought Antonia was asleep. However, upon touching her hand, she was met with an unsettling stillness. Devastated, Marcella screamed for help, and the rest of the household rushed to the room. In a state of panic, They called for emergency services while attempting to revive Antonia on their own before medical professionals arrived. Antonia's situation had become hopeless, and she tragically took her own life by overdosing on sleeping pills. The investigation into her death and the first attempts to hold the perpetrator accountable began. The news shocked her family and friends, as many were unaware of the severe emotional distress Antonia had been experiencing. As Antonia's parents sought to understand what had happened to their daughter, they spoke with her friends and classmates. They were shocked by the rumors and gossip that had been circulating about Antonia. Consuela, in particular, shared everything she knew, but the parents felt that more needed to be done. They hired a top private detective to help reconstruct the events leading up to Antonia's death and gather evidence to bring the person responsible to justice. Alejandro, determined to seek justice for his daughter, used his connections to organize a press conference. In front of dozens of cameras, he shared the devastating truth: his daughter had been the victim of forced bullying, which she had been unable to survive. The person responsible, he emphasized, remained at large. The detective reconstructed the timeline of events from that fateful night and gathered statements from several key witnesses, including Consuela, Benjamin, and a few other university students, who were willing to testify in court. With all the evidence collected, the Antonia family petitioned the court to arrest and prosecute Martín for his actions. However, the police determined that the evidence presented was insufficient to warrant taking him into custody. Martín claimed that everything that happened was consensual, although he admitted that both parties were intoxicated. Furthermore, the victim did not report the incident to the police. As a result, Martín remained free, and he and his family subsequently filed a lawsuit against the Antonia family, accusing them of defamation, harassment, and the unauthorized disclosure of their personal information. According to the Martín family, Antonia's relatives had slandered their son and brother, Martín. In response, the Martín family decided to hold a press conference to defend themselves publicly. They argued that Martín's reputation had been harmed without justification and presented themselves as the ones who had been wronged. The Martín family also accused Antonia of sharing their personal contact information, including their home address, phone numbers, and social media handles. As a result, Martín and his family received daily insults and anonymous death threats. The Martín family maintained that Martín's guilt had not been proven and that everything had happened by mutual consent. They expressed their willingness to defend Martín's case in court. Surprisingly, after this statement, the police supported the Martín family, causing Antonia's relatives to stop making negative comments about them and to stop sharing personal data. This sudden change was a major blow. This unexpected turn of events was a significant setback. Despite this, Antonia's relatives continued to seek justice with the support of the public. Victims who were initially silent about their experiences began speaking out after Antonia's case gained widespread public attention. Within a month, 8 more girls came forward to the police, claiming they too had been harassed and assaulted by Martín. They had previously remained silent, fearing they would be condemned and censured. One of the victims was just 13 years old at the time of the assault. As more girls who suffered at the hands of Martín began contacting the police, he was eventually taken into custody. Martín was arrested in June 2020 and held at Temuco City Prison on suspicion of committing assaults between 2011 and 2019. However, Martín was released on his own recognizance less than a month after his lawyer intervened, and was allowed to remain free for the duration of the investigation. Furthermore, several lawsuits filed by the injured girls were rejected due to the statute of limitations having expired. There was a high likelihood that many cases would be disregarded. Out of 8 appeals, only 2 were registered by the court. The release of Martín from custody and the rejection of the victim's claims sparked widespread outrage. Protests and rallies erupted nationwide, with thousands demanding justice. In response, the prosecutor's office re-examined the case and pushed for a change in Martin's bail conditions, seeking to return him to custody. Meanwhile, the statute of limitations was lifted for all cases of violence committed by Martin. During his trial in February 2021, his social media messages were revealed, in which he boasted about his actions to friends. It was also discovered that Martin kept a collection of his victims' underwear at home, taken as trophies. This collection included items from victims who had previously reported him to the court, as well as a belonging of Antonia's. On August 26, 2021, Martin was charged with 9 counts of crimes involving sexual misconduct. 3 of the victims were minors when the incidents occurred. The Antonia family appealed to the public to speak out against violence and bring those responsible to justice. The trial began in June 2022, allowing Martin's lawyers sufficient time to prepare. They presented witness statements and surveillance footage showing that Antonia left with the defendant voluntarily and did not attempt to resist him. The defense challenged the testimonies of other victims, but in August 2022, the court delivered a guilty verdict against Martin. He was convicted of 8 crimes involving sexual misconduct and causing Antonia's nervous breakdown, which ultimately led to her death. Martin was sentenced to 20 years in prison. However, his lawyers, led by Pinus, promptly filed an appeal. On December 29, the Supreme Court ordered a new trial. In March 2023, Martin's case was assigned to the Public Defender's Office. During the new trial, Martin maintained his innocence, attributing the events leading to Antonia's death to the large quantity of alcohol they had consumed together. Despite this, on July 7, 2023, Martin was found guilty again. The court reduced his initial 20-year sentence to 17 years, considering the 3 years he had already spent in prison. He had only 14 years left to serve. However, Antonia's family expressed dissatisfaction with this decision in an official press release made by her father. They noted that no punishment could bring back their daughter. During the ongoing lawsuits, Antonia's family and other victims affected by Martin's actions joined forces with public figures to advocate for women's rights. Together, they worked to amend the criminal code, specifically the sections related to sexual offenses. Their objective was to protect the rights of victims of harassment and sexual violence.